Okay, well, we're live. Okay, I'm calling this special call meeting on February 9th of our Oak Ridge Town Council to order. And I'll invite, you have the agenda, I'll invite a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries and the agenda is approved. We're now going to proceed, as is our custom, we're going to proceed to a fairly free-form discussion of probably, I would suggest 3 and 4 are sort of mixed together. Item number 5 is separate, and that, depends on what we're doing with the ARP funds. So let's launch into a review of the capital spreadsheet, and maybe we should go ahead and put it up on the screen. So it's the one spreadsheet that we have. It's the only one that's a spreadsheet. And I would suggest that maybe, unless someone's got a better idea, that we walk through the spreadsheet and make any changes, corrections, additions, or subtractions, things that we can agree on easily. And then after we do that, we can start haggling over what big issues seem to be, and we can look at the list that came from Parks and Rec. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sure.
Okay. So Bill, why don't you walk us through the sections, and we can discuss them as we go.
Sure. I just want to note real quickly, one difference between what's on the screen and what's in your packets is the bottom line fund balance projected year end. The spreadsheet I sent out was under review by Sam. His office has since done a more precise fund balance projection. So instead of 4.3 million, which is on your spreadsheet, it's 4.2. Not a big difference, but I wanted to make you aware that you're about $100,000 in terms of the projection for June 30th, 2021. Got a more precise figure from Sam.
So, rounding error? So, for Sam's fee.
Right, there you go.
I wish.
So, as you should be familiar with this format, this is the spreadsheet that we've used the last couple of years to be able to kind of lock in, dynamically update and move projects around to see how it impacts the bottom line. So it's divided into 3 or 4 different sections. And I'll just start at the top with what we call the non-park investments. Everything that you see in red is what I've taken the liberty of updating. Everything that's in black is what's on the existing approved CIP from last year. So in the current fiscal year, 21-22, this is what we expect to spend on these line items. The MST parking lot and bridge is complete. The side path is complete. For MST investments, we're looking to spend roughly no more than $20,000. You know what? Maybe I'll go through the current fiscal year first, so that we've got an idea.
Okay.
The section on water is a new. I've added that section this year, but there's nothing filled in since council has not approved any capital for water. For Heritage Farm Park, we had the full cost of phase 1 allocated in fiscal year 21-22. No, that's not exactly right. We had the project broken in, and on the CIP, we had it broken into 3 different years.
So we had 855,000 in this year.
That's right. So when council determined that we were bidding out all of phase 1 as one project, the estimate from McGill, our engineer, was these 2 numbers together, which is 3.63 million. What I've done is broken it into, we have a contractor in place, late spring. We might expect to spend roughly $250,000 this year, but the bulk of the project will occur in the next fiscal year. $65,000 has been spent for park maintenance and equipment replacements. $30,000 is the tree work at the cemetery. Dugout improvements. All of those projects have been completed, and the debt service on the Whitaker property. And then you can sort of scroll down and see the projected fund balances per year. Back to the non-park, and I guess we can walk through these. For the next fiscal year, we did get a estimate from DOT on what our portion of the intersection improvements, and this is primarily for sidewalks, is $70,000. We had allocated.
Year one, how?
First phase.
As a placeholder, we had used $400,000 as our share of the intersection improvements for years. And council elected to divide that into 2 fiscal years of $250 and $150. However, we've gotten that estimate back from DOT, and it's much less than we had originally anticipated due to DOT taking a higher percentage of the share in the sidewalk construction.
So what will be our share?
So our share is 5% of the sidewalk cost rather than 20%. So $70,000 reflects our actual DOT estimate of what our sidewalk share is. That's right. And then the 150 has not been changed, and that's primarily other components of the intersection that council could choose to partner in. Landscaping would be the big one, but we don't have an idea from DOT yet what our share of those improvements are.
So it could be less.
I would expect it probably would be, because the bulk of that share was our sidewalk share, which came in much less than we thought.
In terms of looking at the timeline, that may actually be, if you're talking about landscaping, be later, after a lot of the project is done,
That's right.
actually be later than 23, 24.
That's right.
That's a good point, because they're going to, I was thinking about that with the next 2 items, but if they're not really going to begin in earnest until spring of '23, which is what we think is likely, then that's gonna go to spring of '24. So I would move that 150 out to year 3,
I agree.
and I would move the,
So just my suggestion is.
Let's let it get
them
through.
finish before we start moving things around.
okay,
I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
let them summarize
I'm gonna
everything.
make a circle.
Good point.
The sidewalk on 150 from 68 to Bastille, that's eastward. This $325,000 project was how this cost allocation was what council approved last year, so that's not been changed. Again, to Martha's point about the construction timeline for the intersection project, it would probably, since we're not partnering with DOT on that, it would probably make sense for DOT to complete their work at the intersection before we started a sidewalk
Do
project.
you know what their schedule is, DOT?
They're likely to start in spring of '23, so next year, 12 months from now. And then they'd be completing in spring of '25. The MST committee did a strategic planning discussion at their last meeting, and this is pretty consistent with what council has allocated in the past. And this reflects the sort of opportunistic, strategic way that the committee is operating, looking for easements when available, when the opportunity arises, trail construction that involves building pedestrian bridges, parking facilities when needed. So this is sort of representative of the type of work that they hope to accomplish in the next 5 years.
20,000. What was that going to be spent on?
That's this year's expenses. The majority of that was the surveying and legal work to get the public access easement on the trails at Harris Cove.
Okay.
And then the last item here is a new one that's been suggested. I want to say, Martha, that was your
Well,
suggestion, or you
I
and
think
Jim?
a couple of
Yes,
us,
that's
Jim
right.
brought it up.
Jim, come from Jim.
not to jump in, but the Linville to Fogelman actually, I think, is on the pedestrian plan for a part of that original sidewalk from 150 to Fogelman, but DOT, their project cut it off.
Right.
And so this would simply be bringing it back, the project back to where it would have been, it had it been done according to our pedestrian plan. And opens up a lot of houses.
So should we look at this section here?
Pretty,
You wanna
Hey,
finish
I
up
finish
your
up,
one?
let's,
Let's finish
Well,
up.
I think if we go through everything, we might lose the thread, but why don't we look at it by sections and then go back to it as a whole and take a global view?
That's fine.
So, okay, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I think because of the timeline for the intersection project, we should probably move,
everything one year out.
yeah, the year 2 for the intersection improvements, we should move out to year 4. And the 70,000, Bill, do you still think that'll happen? When do we think that'll happen?
That'll be a cost share agreement that will be expected to provide when the contract is let. So we will need that next year.
So we're gonna move year 2 to year 4.
Right, the 150. And then on the next line, the sidewalks from 150 and 68 to Bastille, we could move them out to years 4 and 5, Bill, is that what you think?
Right, if the,
Or 3 and 4, I mean, would we start work? We don't
I'd say
know
3
how
and-
they're gonna,
I think we wanna wait till the project is completed.
Until their sidewalk is done, because even though the drawing's gonna say there, we don't want to get in their way.
right,
That's right.
And
And
also, they may adjust.
but we also don't know which intersection they're gonna finish first, but
and we
we can
don't,
certainly put it out to years 4 and 5, and we can adjust it as necessary.
Or three, if they're completing in spring of 25, we might be ready for the first part of it in the 24, 25.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Well, the 70,000, I would think, could move also out to year 2 or 3, because,
He said that's the cost share we might have to actually give them when they do.
yeah,
right,
they're,
you know what I'm saying, but year 1, they're not gonna start.
So you're
Saying
saying
they're
moving,
determined that they're not gonna start work
That's right.
until, well, I'm sorry, the spring is 23, you think they might start, so they might want some of the money in spring.
Year 2.
and I think they'll want us to sign a municipal agreement and have it budgeted even before they start.
Right, so
Okay, so-
70,000 would stay in year 1.
Yes.
How would they do that? We pay up front before they start breaking ground, or is it in phases as they're doing? How do they do those contracts? We never have one of those.
I don't know, we'd have to.
We'll learn it.
so where are we moving? the
Anyway,
200?
we can budget it, it's not an issue.
Just
Where-
look at
where-
what he did up there, George. He moved it out to years
Okay.
4 and 5,
Okay, well, that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
so.
or 3 and 4. You moved it to 3 and 4, Bill, right? Okay.
I did.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, that makes sense.
we're
It
looking
does
at
make
next year,
sense,
we-
because-
We can move it around again,
Exactly, because we'll know more next year.
you know.
More or less.
Now, I guess discussing the Linville Fogelman, I brought it up and Martha brought it up, is that's a doorway to several hundred homes.
Yes, it is.
Because if we bring the sidewalk down to Fogelman, you can walk into Martha's development. And then right now, there is a private trail over to, what's the development, I always forget the name of it?
It's Oak Ridge Lakes and the
Yeah.
groves that I
Lakes,
like.
Lake Brooks.
Even if it stays private, you're opening the core.
Right.
The ability to walk into the core, which is key to our pedestrian plan, to all those homeowners.
What if we end up moving Fogelman Road though, if that property gets developed?
They'll have to put a sidewalk in too, so the sidewalk's still gonna be there. So even if someone develops that corner, they'll just add on to whatever sidewalk's there. But like I said, the biggest thing is, like I said, there's other things we solve. But like if that trail could be made more public, you basically got Van's neighborhood, you got the new neighborhood going there, and you got you run, I think it is.
It will run.
You were,
There's 300-400 homes.
But
They're
even without that, you've got a lot of homes.
You got 300-400 homes that can now walk to the center of town, can now walk to the park, walk up to the.
Correct.
trail.
Amen.
But on the, as far as the Linville and Fogelman, It seems to me, if I recall correctly, the transportation, plan that we put together a few years ago, we do have a proposed sidewalk that would run down, the road, 68. Actually,
That's correct, it is on that plan.
Actually, it runs all the way down to Marketplace, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, our pedestrian thing goes pretty far.
So,
I'm sorry.
so I mean, it seems to me like, what we're doing is just starting that project, which, I mean, on that would be on the west side of the road, if I recall.
No, we're talking on the east
East
side.
side.
We're talking on the Jamie side, the Eagle positions. Because
Okay,
like I said,
I don't have the plan in front of me, so I feel like.
No, I'm just saying, is if I think, what Dennis office is.
Yeah, I do know.
So that side
So-
is what we're talking about, bringing it down to Fulton.
Mhm.
Because then, you're gonna be able to cross
Yeah, with the traffic circle.
at this traffic circle. So you'll be able to cross over, walk down to Fulton, and then walk in the Fulton.
Mhm.
And like I said, there's a trail over to an existing development already. And like I said, that is a doorway to several other developments as far as being able to have a trail. And then also the new development, what's the new development going in?
Landing, or pretty landing.
No, brand new one's gonna have.
Honeycomb.
They're gonna have a bunch of trails too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. What year did we, how much, we need 100,000?
Do we know that that's a,
That's based on the per foot cost that we paid recently. So that, in 2 years, or
Could be
whenever
more,
this,
could be more. So, but hopefully not too much.
But if we do it, it'd be probably a year 3 or 4, because again, it would be something we do at the end of the ERT's project.
So why don't we move that 100,000 down to year 3?
Well, the big question is,
And,
is everybody on board with it?
well, I think that's why I'm asking that question, sir.
I'm just saying, I'm on board. I just don't
Okay,
think
I
it's
know
just-
you are. I'm on board. Are you on board? What about you, Doug?
No, I'm not.
it's not going, it's out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's coming close.
But you could go up to Ives Drive and cut right through the backyard.
That's right, go
Your house,
backyard.
go right through your
Yeah,
backyard.
are you on board?
Well, yeah, I think it's a good idea. I would put it in year 4, I think.
You think year 4?
You know,
'Cause-
I think we're gonna be finding out a lot about how, we're doing a lot on sidewalks in those years.
Yes, we are.
And, the other ones are higher priorities, to my mind.
You're talking about the 68, that's the,
Yes,
okay. Well,
and that one's really,
no.
See, so I would argue that this will open up more homes than 68 to 68. Look at the homes that are down, now granted, there's a new development going on behind Methodist Church.
Mhm.
But from an absolute.
I don't think that's the only way to measure the importance of a sidewalk, though. The importance of putting it in the historic district is that area of town is, 150 is a lot less busy than 68, and it should be walkable, you know what I mean? Because it's already got that small town charm. It's not walking down a highway.
But I look at the source of people walking on it.
I think that there are.
There are more people who walk on.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I think there are people about
It's
Yeah, I'm not trying to.
it. I still, and I don't think that it's 3 years, we can adjust that.
Well, it accesses a lot of the same neighborhoods.
Well, we're going,
Ashton Park,
Let's
Okay,
put 100,000 into year 3. I mean, who knows, we may have to push it out to year 4.
I'll be honest, year 3 or 4 doesn't.
I don't care which year,
Because like I said, when we get to year 2, we're gonna know more about what's going on with DOT.
because I think 3 and 4 are gonna run together depending on,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to make decisions when we get close to the end of that.
And then we may decide that it might be beneficial as a
Let's
single project.
tentatively put it in year
that's a
3.
good point.
Let's put
It
it
doesn't
in,
matter to me.
let's put it in
Put
year
it
3.
in year 3,
Put it in year
3 and 4. Can we put it right in the middle?
Well, and you can come back after we,
3. I mean, we can
Go
always come
through.
back and adjust.
Okay,
all of your other priorities and see where the bottom line ends up, we can,
Yeah.
obviously, we can change that.
so any other changes to this little section?
I like the idea that we're stacking a lot of the sidewalk and the intersection and pretty much
Well, you can.
targeting the end of DOT's timeframe.
And if you wanna do 2 sidewalks at the same time.
And we're halfway to
Get some
Bishop's
savings.
house with the sidewalk.
Now, in the next section on water, I know this is a, like, money in, money out thing, but I think it's important for that state appropriation for water. I don't know where I guess we put it under, I would just put it there, I would put that 1,155 in year one, because we've got to spend it by June 30th.
Yeah.
And then when we get down to the funding section, Bill, we would just add it in.
Right.
June 30th.
In the following year, because we've got to spend it first before we get reimbursed.
Okay, so what year?
Year one, put in the 1,155.
And we realize we don't have firm plans whether or not we're gonna spend it or not, anyway.
We are getting
Well-
close though.
We're gonna spend it, don't worry.
Well, do you wanna allocate it? I mean, we don't really have,
I
I
would
mean,
just,
we've got a ballpark for both of these, but
you know,
Well, what
just
is it?
put it all, if you want to put it in
Put it
one of
right there.
those, I would put it under the water for firefighting at
Well,
this
that's,
point.
you and I are on the same page. So let's do that.
But put it, I'm sorry, year one, not the current year, Bill.
you're right.
Year one, 1.5.
And then when we get down there to we can add it in there. I added it in as a, next to the part, right above the part of money. As a reimbursement that we either get,
Mhm.
I guess that fiscal year goes to the. I would show it as reimbursed in year two.
Mhm. Where we move that to?
Well, we just need to make sure that it's also shown in additional funds.
I would put, we won't get it back till year two though.
Mhm.
Because it's a reimbursement.
Right, I mean, that,
Do we have to spend it, or do we have to encumber it?
encumber it,
Right.
which is another reason why the reimbursement ought to be out.
But realistically, the project, if we go ahead with a project that size,
Yeah,
it's gonna spread over 2 years probably anyway. isn't it?
I mean, we'll know more when we get, specific recommendations based on the Wooten report that's coming in soon. Okay, Bill, you wanna walk us through the Heritage Farm Park section?
This 3.6 million together in the current fiscal year, but the bulk in the next fiscal year is McGill's estimate of the engineer's opinion of probable cost. The Veterans Honor Green Council committed to a $34,000 match this year. And in last year's CIP, you indicated you'd be committed to a $34,000 match next year. Tennis courts and basketball courts were the two major items from future phases on Heritage Farm Park. And this is where council elected to put them in last year's CIP.
Surprised the basketball court's only $30,000.
We haven't gotten new estimates. I
Right,
mean,
we haven't got the new estimate yet.
they're probably both double.
Yeah, that's right, that McGill didn't,
That 3.6 is June of last year.
but the tennis courts and basketball courts are probably over than that.
Okay.
Right. Oh, the Doug Novine tennis courts.
Was it?
Nothing.
The Doug
I just
Novine-
want to point out while we're in this section that we're waiting for updated costings on the Veterans Honor Green. But it's, it was originally costed about a year and a half ago at $150. It's probably at $250, given what we've seen in all our other projects.
How are they dealing with collecting money for that?
I think, right, yeah, I mean, we've collected like 88,000, and some of there's still some matched counties that the dates are confusing, but anyway, we're trying to get up to 125,000 by the end of March.
Towns.
Yeah, the town's part isn't all in there yet, but that includes some of the town's part. So one decision that we can think about as we move forward, we don't have to decide it now, is whether we put a portion of the small town development grant in there, because it was designated, although we're not bound to it, to the Heritage Veterans Green. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, the park and the veterans site. So But it's also, I don't think it matters what we spend it on, from their
Are
perspective.
you ready for comment on that?
Of course, sure.
I know we're not to the additional funds. I like the idea, perhaps, probably not the whole 50,000, because I think that would take everybody over the goal. But I would be very happy to allocate, let's say, 20,000 of it, of the 50, simply because it makes financial sense. You're leveraging that money. In other words, if it is a matching fund, when you contribute 20,000 to it, that means that, gets them to raise that additional 20,000
So I just want to
as well.
understand, so you're suggesting, you're recommending that we increase our match from $68,000 to $88,000?
And that's probably what the prices are gonna come in.
Well,
No, 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 no,
They're
no,
gonna higher.
I'm just,
Yes.
I'm not saying.
Yeah,
That's all, I'm just asking, I'm not
Yes.
I had a little
giving an
different,
opinion on it.
I had a little different take on it.
And I'm talking about taking 20,000 of the $50,000 grant and using it as a matching fund, because that leverages essentially into $40,000 for the.
So for the coming year, you raise it 34 to 54.
54.
Okay, say I had a little.
Plus, we have some this year they raised, we haven't been able to match, because they raised more than.
No,
Yeah.
that's the 54 we matching.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I had a little different thing. My thoughts are that the whole 50,000 should go to the veterans, so. And as part of the matching arrangement, because the cost of items and cost of materials have gone up. We think that this thing's gonna cost more than what we originally.
Well, we do think it's gonna cost at least $100,000
But
more.
most importantly, that money will help to attract the big donors. Because they know we're gonna.
Well, they're a year in, so they've probably gotten most of their big ones.
When
No, I don't think that's true.
You don't?
I don't think that's true.
When do you think realistically when they might start construction?
Well, we have to raise the money first.
That's what I'm thinking about is this still gonna be, are they still gonna be raising money another year out? And instead we just, if we go with George's suggestion, that maybe we can allocate it to a third year of matching.
No, what that would do is that would slow the project. What we wanna do, or at least what the committee wants to do, is get the fundraising done in this. We would like to go to construction by next spring, but that means we have to have all the money by about this fall. Now, is that doable? I don't know.
So, what's your thoughts there on this?
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
finish your thought, Jim.
I'm open to either one.
For no hard reasons,
Yeah.
I'm leaning with it toward Martha's suggestion. Like I said, I don't have a hard argument for either one. I just feel like the money, $50,000, to some degree is for, in general, for the town. And it wasn't specifically, just like every other town that got it, it wasn't given with a specific purpose in mind. Jamestown got it, Summerfield got it.
No, hold on. It was, this for development, for parks and for the veterans.
Well, no, in this one, they did say
It could be,
Heritage Veterans.
They did, they referred specifically.
I doubt the bill at the state level mentioned anything about this, the veterans.
Yes,
It
it
did,
did.
actually.
Actually, it did.
Did it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Jim.
Okay.
The language in there said that.
So this actually, we're able to take care of. with
We're not tied to that.
With 50,000 for this, you're taking care of really two birds with one stone. One, it's developmental of the monument itself, but it's also enhancing the park, which is another development. So, I mean, now, if we wanted to take the 50,000 and split it up in 2 years, add it to what how much are we currently giving?
Well, we only have 1 year left of fundraising.
Got 1 year
Well, we
left.
would rather put it all in this, whatever we're gonna give, I would recommend putting it all in year one.
Okay,
And then if the fundraising lags, we could, and they don't get it all, we could do them the favor of putting some of it into year three.
but let's, I think, let's do this. I mean, this is for, folks who have served our country. This is for the, and this is for the town.
We all understand that.
So what I'm just saying is, should it be used, again, it's used for the veterans and the park.
You're taking care of two birds with one stone.
What I'm saying is, some other part of the park may benefit from money too.
Well, we're gonna get that, we already got, how much, 400?
But George, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go.
If you take the whole 50
Mhm,
and put it towards the Veterans Honor Grant,
mhm.
is that 50,000 that must be matched?
Yes,
Yes, I would say yes.
I would
Yes.
say
yes.
And what you know I love this project, so I'm gonna feel like I don't think we have to do the full 50,000. But what I like about that is that if we think it's gonna cost 250, that means that almost every dollar raised, that would get us to the 250 mark. Because these two amounts, 34 and 34, get us to the 150 amount.
Mhm.
Now, there's some complicated math because they had already raised some money prior to the matches.
Yeah.
But an additional 50,000 would raise 100,000 that would get us to 250.
What's the total project, total
Well,
cost?
we think it's gonna be about 250. Now,
I'm okay with that. I just from the wording and the verbiage that I had been hearing, I thought we were going to spread it. I have no problem with that as long as it's matching.
Yeah, as long as.
As long as it's matching. And if
Yes.
they're unable to match it,
It'll get it.
then if they don't get it and it goes back into available funds to put towards
Other developments.
other part.
No.
Okay, so that's fine, if you want to do the whole.
Okay.
So
Doug,
next
any
year's
thoughts on
application,
this? Any thoughts on this?
Cost on it?
Any thoughts on this,
Oh,
just
thoughts.
putting the whole grant amount towards
so we'll do a match of 84,000 next year.
for the veterans?
If they don't get it, that money slides, right?
Right.
They have to match it.
Understand, they don't lose it.
No,
No,
So
no, we're not gonna.
no, we're
It
not,
says-
no, we're not gonna lose
I don't want to start a whole conversation down this road, but what happens if they don't raise enough money?
Well, what I was just saying is,
It would have to
if
go-
there's still fundraising,
Or you
we could
decide.
do the gracious thing and move it into year two.
Well, it might be, continue to.
Well, we need more time, but I'm just saying, in worst case, if they never raise the money,
Pivot.
we can use that money for something else.
Right, that's good. Yeah, you pivot the money to something else as long as it meets the definition.
Like I said, I don't want to get a big down that road, but I just was curious.
I mean, yeah, the 10-second answer is we do have to submit a scope of work to the state to let them know what we're gonna spend it on. But that scope of work, you just stay in contact with the grant administrator and say, hey, look, we're pivoting on this, we're gonna get the matching funds, we wanna split it out a different way. As long as it still meets the intent of the legislation.
Alright, that's my guy. Okay, so I'm fine with moving to 50 into next year, maybe 84.
So year one's gonna be 80.
And what do we think about tennis courts and basketball court? Do we want to leave them in year three? We're finishing the park in year one, is the plan. Then we have the park online for a year.
Well, actually, probably finished part of year two.
Well,
We're gonna start digging, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting my years mixed up, I apologize.
yeah, our engineer thinks, and the reason, if I can digress for just a second, the reason why it's, it makes sense to kind of do this, the bulk of it in one fiscal year, is that we're gonna be subject to several single audits, both for the part that money.
Don't worry, I got my years mixed up, I'm sorry.
And our engineer thinks that this is at the most a 1-year project, and it's mostly grading, they can work through the winter. So as long as we have somebody under contract, May.
So they're going to be ready to seed and all of that
Just coming fall.
by 6/30/23?
Well, I don't know how the contractor would schedule the work precisely, but I think the expectation is that they'd be able to work. They're not gonna take 3 months off in the winter time for the winter. They're gonna be working through the series.
And do we think that doing the tennis courts and the basketball courts, I would assume doing those as a single project, that there's some benefit to that?
I would think so.
Mhm.
How many tennis courts? How many?
6.
Six.
And with pickleball,
Pickleball is,
pickleball lines drawn on, like little pictures of
well,
pickleball.
we talked about converting some of those tennis courts to pickleball.
Well, all of them would have be marked for pickleball, so you could play one or the other.
It'd be the Devon tennis.
I mean, I'm happy to leave them in year 3 and see how it looks at the end.
Yeah.
Because I'm also happy to move them out to year 4.
Me too.
Well, we've been pushing those things back and back and back, I think we ought to get going on the, as soon as the area's ready for,
I agree.
Or do you think you're wanting to spend a lot of money?
no, I don't expect any money.
Well, that's a lot. I'm just checking, because I'm right.
And we had, and well, I think the reason that blank year is in there is because essentially we were taking what we were wanting to do in the first 3 years and we were compressing it into one project. So that blank year really isn't blank, it's that we moved forward
Mhm.
the,
Yeah, and we-
things that were in year
and
2.
we haven't talked about the American Rescue Funds, with the possibility there, of whether or not we want to, we'll kind of go forward a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I mean, between the ARP funds and the possibility of a loan.
Mhm.
Do you want to do the next section for us, Bill?
Sure.
Pretty short.
Right, this is mostly, and in your packets, Carrie shared his large equipment replacement schedule, in case you're interested. What, the replacement schedule for the assets, the vehicles and such in the town park. So that's what these numbers here represent. The $30,000 was the tree work at the cemetery that we did this year, and the $60,000 is the placeholder for the security system. The council placed in year 3 last year.
Well, that's weird there on the
That's
same
weird.
line.
Yeah, I think we did it because they were both, we weren't sure what we were gonna put into them. at
I'll
that
put
point.
security on a separate line.
I'll have to do that.
They're still on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's top of page 2. A very two top lines.
I got cemetery.
Yeah, cemetery slash security.
Okay.
Well, I think we need to separate that out though, so.
And I have a question here.
Fair.
Your, large equipment for park maintenance, there's a couple of things that are, pushed out to 23 and 24, that are new. They're, they don't say replace. Is this equipment that you, have determined that you will need for Heritage Farm Park? Or is Heritage Farm Park equipment, maintenance equipment and that kind of thing included or not, I guess is what I'm
Well,
asking.
the tractor and the bush hog was put on that schedule, not knowing what the relationship is gonna be with Sam.
To be prepared.
Yeah. We just had to put that in there because we said that the farm wasn't gonna be done, and we were gonna get responsible.
And the debris blower, is that a new type of equipment for you?
Yeah, that's a turbine blower, required lots, and you use it for weed and everything.
Oh, okay.
We just get such a large area now that we're trying to maintain, but.
So we may get to 24 and not need the bush hog.
That's correct, that's correct.
Okay, so comments on this section? I mean, I would just go with Terry's recommendations there.
I just want to know what it included.
Right. Any argument with that? Just go with Terry. And then the cemetery's already been spent. Security, kind of, for me, it's an open question at this point.
I'm fine with it as your page.
Yeah, me too.
Okay? Okay, well, let's move on to town park.
The numbers that are in, not highlighted are just carryovers from the approved CIP. The Redmond House renovation, that number has been updated based on the cost estimator's opinion, based on the plans prepared by the architect. But that's still in the year 2, the location that council programmed it last year. An additional line added for Wi-Fi at Town Park. The quote that Jim was able to get is $15,000 for that project.
I still have a question on that.
And in fact, this goes, so there was one
No,
more
go ahead.
column.
I'm sorry, go ahead, I interrupted you, I apologize.
There is an additional column here for year 6. Year 6 plus, and that's where council has put the field 5, fitness stations and the splash pad are all sort of in that beyond programmed column there, so.
Okay, I have a on the Wi-Fi, 15,000. I'm wondering, why do we need Wi-Fi when everybody now can buy these things where you have individualized hotspots?
It's fine, I mean, there's no question that if you have a cell phone, but the cell phone coverage in the park, if you don't have the carrier, the tower near next to you, the coverage is poor.
Mhm.
So, like I have Verizon,
Okay.
and so coverage in the park is very poor in the Verizon.
Mhm.
So people that have vendors and things like that, that come and have their PayPal app or whatever, or their charge card, things like that, have difficulty getting coverage from their cell phone.
Mhm.
So with Wi-Fi, you're able to connect. There are a lot of devices that don't connect, like my iPad does not have cell coverage. So if I wanted to bring my Kindle or my iPad or something like that to the park and use it, I either have to connect to my cell phone, which is possible, there's no question, because those things are possible. But not everyone has those access and things like that. I know there are times when there are events in the park where people are using different software. I think Terry can give you some more advice on some of the reasons why people want to have Wi-Fi access. And I agree, in 3, 4, 5 years, the need for this may go away with the whole 5G ubiquitous. But as long as all devices are not self-capable, which is like a lot of laptops are not self-capable, a lot of iPads are, like I said, maybe Terry can add a little bit of reasons why Wi-Fi in the park is beneficial.
Will the new cell tower change anything?
It may, I don't know how far that cell tower will cover. So the one over by the academy may resolve some issues, but again, that's only for devices that are self-capable. Not everyone has to, like I said, a lot of laptops, iPads, things like that don't have cell coverage. And still, if you don't have coverage with the carrier, that is with the tower, you're not gonna have coverage. This is not I don't know if you want to add something, Terry.
Well, I was just gonna say, Jim was referring to, look, there's a lot of athletic software out there, like Game Manager, that teams use to score and administer their leagues or teams.
Mhm.
And that's more and more, every year it's more and more commonplace, so.
Now, would that need, so you're saying that would probably need Wi-Fi?
And I'm talking about,
But you're saying that's,
George, is that your phone? Can
I'm
you
thinking-
silence that, please?
yeah, it's like somebody wanted to sell me.
Yeah, just turn it off altogether.
I didn't realize-
Everybody can silence your
Thank you,
phones.
thank you, Mayor. And, so, anyway, so you're saying that actually would need something more than just like a localized hotspot?
yeah, because, yes,
Okay.
yeah, because like I said, these people could be on either side of the baseball field, on either sideline of the multi-purpose fields.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the other benefits.
This
I'm
was-
sorry.
This would actually benefit ORYA, and help them in their activities, which is important for our town.
For anybody that's using that type of software.
Exactly.
Now,
So, I mean, that's fine,
Now, some of the other things, this is also like, just like the sidewalk down the Florida, is an enabling event. Wi-Fi in the park enables us to also live stream some of the events that we have in the park.
Mhm.
Not everybody can get to the park. Yes, we want to try to get everybody to come to the park, but there's people that can't get to the park and they might want to participate, watch an event in the park. People that are hearing impaired, you can put it in so that the audio is live streamed. So somebody with a cell phone can hear it even though they're there, and they're watching the event. So they have things. So again, it's an enabling thing. It's not, I'm trying to figure out the right word. It's not life or death.
it's not like,
It's not a life or death
right,
thing. It's not like electricity and things like that are, really, really required. Things like that, or fire department, that kind of stuff. But it is something that people want, that the Parks and Rec is supportive of it and things like that.
I mean, it sounds like it would have some practical locations then, particularly like with RYA, our business community.
Now, when we get to Heritage Park,
Yeah.
when we get to Heritage Park, we may have a completely different option. In 2 years, we have a completely different option how we solve over here at all.
Martha,
So-
let's let,
so-
hang on, George, let's
so-
give Martha a chance
Oh, I
to
just
speak.
had one other question.
Well,
So in essence, you get, so what you're saying is that this will be for the town park?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine, I don't have any objections to this.
I'm gonna throw out a couple of positives and a couple of things that I have been asking around and talking to different users. And you were talking about the Wi-Fi for hearing impaired. And I have a family member that they would be able to hear what somebody was saying because her hearing aids are Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
In fact, that's how she listens to her phone without blasting everybody in there. So, but a couple of the concerns that I've heard have been, if you're using, I'm looking at the coverage, the planned coverage for this particular plan with this
Right.
many
Mhm.
boosters, would be to cover the sports fields, concession stand, and the amphitheater. And Redwood Field, like where we did
Yes,
Heritage Day.
it'll cover shelter one,
Okay.
it'll cover the ball fields and the multi-purpose fields,
Okay.
and it will shelter two. So those are the three main spots, and of course, the further away you get from them,
Okay.
you can lose.
But someone just out walking and streaming their music would probably find it was intermittent.
Depending on where they walk. They, definitely if you walk in the woods, they probably would drop out.
Okay.
So, there's no question there. Now, you can add more hotspots. So, I mean,
Or boosters.
you can put
Yeah.
boosters or repeaters or whatever you call it, like if we wanted to cover the parking lot really well, you could put a repeater over there. And if there were some other areas, in fact, they mapped out a couple other spots over in shelter two that you might put some other spots. Because, so
Okay, and then
it's expandable, so.
it's expandable, okay? When you look at expanding it,
Mhm.
and I didn't bring your cost to break down an analysis, but let's say you found that it was irritating to people because they're walking and all of a sudden they're over here near their retirement area and it drops every time and they've got to reconnect and get back in front of the other. How expensive are the repeaters or the expansions per unit? Or do we double the price per
I have to
area?
look, no, I have to look at it, but it's probably like 3,000 to 5,000 for another spot.
35,000.
I'm guessing, I'm just guessing. The other biggest problem is really, it's gonna be, there has to be electricity.
What was that?
There has to be electricity. Because like, if you're walking along the trail, along the woods, where an area I think you might think there's gonna be a dead spot, I don't know if there's electricity really handy there. So that would be. the
Okay,
issue
that would be
there.
a major, that would turn it from what is essentially a small capital project into a more major.
Yeah, and like I said, I went into this not expecting to cover the entire
Okay.
park. We didn't have the money to put up a big tower that would cover the entire park.
Okay,
please
I mean,
come towers.
we have to disguise that as a pine tree.
Well,
The other question that has come up in discussions with other people that I didn't think about, is whether the network, the Wi-Fi would be secure, and I'm assuming it would not be.
It would be a public, it would be
Be
public.
public, just
Wi-Fi.
like in the airports or something like that.
And the one thing is that one of the things, you still have to log in, but you really wouldn't log in. You would just have to acknowledge on the page.
Yeah, click OK, click the box.
This is like we're saying, you use this, we're not guaranteeing anything,
right,
all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing they suggested, like at midnight, everybody would knocked off. So if
Just like in
somebody
the
was still
hotel,
connected
you're
at
not-
midnight, they get dropped off, so that every morning you can start fresh.
okay, that's good. I mean, I don't have a problem with this.
Do we think that there will be any, I think sometimes when you say, oh, we have Wi-Fi in the park, and then people experience these areas without Wi-Fi. I remember when we first talked about this, Sean or Sanders, someone said, oh, the problem with Wi-Fi is that you get complaint after complaint, like, as the town, oh, the Wi-Fi doesn't work.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think that's a huge thing, but I just, I don't know how we would communicate to people that the Wi-Fi coverage is for these primary, I mean, it's a
I think-
complicated message.
Well, you can put a message that just says limited Wi-Fi coverage.
I guess
You know, I mean,
No, I mean, it's like anything else we offer in the park.
Yeah.
You're always you're gonna have an education
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like anything else.
Right.
I mean, we're struggling with educating people to keep their dogs on leashes.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I
I'm not
guess-
trying to minimize it.
no,
I'm
no,
just saying,
but you're gonna have that, and if you wanna put a thing out, you say limited Wi-Fi coverage.
I guess for me, it is a matter of users, and as someone who has actually had meetings in the shelters,
Mhm.
and we have a laptop, it would have been valuable
It would have been valuable.
to be able to do things with that. So if you're thinking about the users that are perhaps using the shelters for a purpose, or the sports teams
Mhm.
as the primary users of the Wi-Fi, then I have no problem in this. But if we really are looking at, we want to say, we have Wi-Fi at Town Park and we think we're using it for the average person who doesn't want a public, who's not gonna do anything except maybe listen to music
Mhm.
on a non-secure network.
Mhm.
And, and the people that are walking and that's the issue. So I'm a little bit ambivalent. I think the defined user, the person that we're targeting to serve. And if it's worth 15,000 to service the sports teams, whether it's
Why
ORY
don't you
or
push
other
it, push
leagues.
it back to the number five, so you can understand what the technology is.
Well, you know, that's an interesting point. The only thing my main concern was, you think 5G isn't gonna be really accessible to helping most people for a couple more years?
It's probably, well, not here yet. I don't think it's not here yet. But also, we still have the issue that the device has to be capable.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
point.
Mhm.
And not everybody has it. Again, you have to have a cell-capable device. Now, I expect that, yeah, in 2 to 3 years, 4 years, when 5G becomes ubiquitous, the whole promise of 5G is you basically have internet everywhere.
Mhm.
You know?
But I think to your point, yeah, you may have some complaints. I think that's where you can always run a little now. And the newspaper will educate people where, you know, this is for, you know, the sports field, this is for the 2 shelters, this is for this. Outside of that, you're kind of on your own. I mean, but you know, you can advertise, I mean, and I'm not gonna say you're not gonna get complaints, you're gonna get complaints, you know. People are gonna complain, period, that's just natural to the beast. Now, the question is, does the 15,000 address the problem that helps our parks, helps our businesses, helps the youth association? The answer is yes, it does help those people, so.
Well, let's open it up, because we're spending a lot of time on a small amount of money.
But I would like to see us move this to year, let's see, what do you think, Jim? Year 2?
Well, actually, because of the one, because it's $15,000, because of the benefit that you give, I was actually suggesting we just do it now and do a budget amendment. Just do
In
it.
other words, do it during the current year. Well, I don't have a problem with that. You know, what do you think? You're the manager,
No, I mean, yeah.
Pleasure.
Tom?
That's it, this is a
I mean, like I said, I don't know.
But can we-
Hold on. This is a council decision.
I would like to go ahead and, I'm in agreement, let's get it done. And,
Martha, hold on, George, let's go around the table. Tell, what do you think?
I'd say push it,
Up to year
until we
1?
find out, 2 or 3, I'm thinking, until we
Okay.
find out exactly what the technology is. And as you say, it's changing every day.
Well, what I'm saying is, in 2 to 3 years, you'll still be in a situation as the technology's always going to be changing.
Right. So I mean, a feel for what we can do.
Well, I've always, with my thing is, you can wait for new technology, but you're always gonna be waiting for new technology, because there's always gonna be something better around things. So the question is, do you want to provide the service? If you want to provide the service, you use the technology you have today. If you don't want to provide the service, then let's not do it at all, ever. Because, like I said, it's still gonna be $15,000, 2 years, 3 years from now. You know, it'll be different equipment, it'll be different things. But like I said, Just for the most part, it's not gonna benefit me much at all. I don't go to the park and use the Wi-Fi and things like that. When I go to the park, I usually turn my phone off and things like that. That's why I go to the park.
Yeah.
But like I said, there are the sports teams, I know the youth association is supportive of it and things like that.
And Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec wants it and things like that, so. Like I said, if you're gonna push it, I would actually say not do it at all. So if you're thinking that you should just push it, I would say, what you're really saying is let's not do it.
Let's not ever do it,
Because it's always gonna be one of those things that you would think about pushing.
because it's not because.
And that's fine. If somebody, you guys don't wanna do it, that's fine. But if you're gonna do it, I'd say let's just.
Do we have much interest in it?
Well, this isn't something that's been vetted sort of with the public, but Parks and Rec rented highly.
Mhm.
The word is that ORYA wants it. Martha, what are your thoughts on it at this point?
Well, I'm a little bit ambivalent because I have good cell service. So I mean, personally, for me, it's not going to change anything. The thing that I heard today was the hearing impaired that I did like. And I think anytime that we can accommodate, those types of disabilities, if you would like to call it that, I think it's a good thing for the town and for the resident or the user. And, you know, I put a lot of weight in the recommendations that are coming from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
If it were, you were talking about $150,000, or even
Oh,
$30,000 or $40,000, I might be going, I'm not sure we're gonna get that much benefit.
I think you and I will be in that same.
The 50 is pushing my limits to, I thought it'd be less than that. I thought
But,
it'd be less than that. I think part of it is because of supply issues.
Have you determined what it's gonna be? Have you guys feel?
Yeah, it's 15,000.
15 will do it. Yeah, if it's gonna 15 now.
Let's do it, let's go
What
ahead.
about year one? Is there a difference between doing it now and in year one?
I don't think the equipment's gonna change dramatically in price or anything.
What about getting this installed, Bill and Terry? Can we do it now?
I mean, it's basically shovel ready.
It's not, it's nothing that's, other than unlocking the concession stand, there's nothing that's staffed.
We've got a quote in hand, I mean, it's ready to go.
So we're good to go.
Well, I mean, but let me say that this is a great discussion, but this is just like a plan. So what we have to do is next month, bring it to council for you to approve it as a new project. Right.
Okay.
Well, that's sort of like what your Dan says, it's a small amount. Saying hardly worth all the time to spend
Yeah.
talking about it.
Well, let's go ahead and put it for this year.
Let's put it in current year, and we'll bring it to council. Other items in this area, let's see.
Okay. That service,
Well, debt service, we have to make those payments. And that's in the next section, actually.
actually it is.
I would take out the splash pad. I don't really think that fits into our vision for the new park.
I'll also add that if we're gonna be using the well,
I thought about that
property
today.
for Heritage Farm Parks,
Our
that
capacity is done.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, that's for this part. Yeah, I would just take that out. Are we in agreement on that?
Yes.
Anybody wanna?
Well, none of us have young kids, so I think,
Well, it's also very difficult for a town to manage
But
a
the-
splash pad.
But the amount of water that is required is difficult, and we're having difficulty getting water from Heritage Farm Park, and very likely we'll end up pulling water from the existing
Right.
water supply.
It's actually recycled.
Yeah, I mean, once you fill it out.
Oh, it is?
okay,
Oh,
that's-
It's a filtration system.
I'd be inclined to take it off the list
You
because
have-
we put it so far out that we're likely gonna do another survey for the next couple of years. If it became a hot issue, we just would bring it back in. But like I said, we're not planning on doing it for 6+ years, so it's not like it's,
And it's
I would
been
say
2
for
years since we surveyed.
yeah, so I would think we're gonna do another survey sometime soon. And if it is a hot item,
Well, I don't know why we would do another survey. I mean, this park is almost filled up.
well, we.
I mean, well, that's another discussion. Yeah.
Depending on what the residents wanna do.
Right. I mean, that's sort of updating the master plans for these two parks, but I think that's a good argument though, Jim.
It
Yeah,
just,
I would say, you know,
Just a one day.
Well, I look at year 6 as being the maybe one days.
Mhm.
You know, well, we keep pushing the same
Right,
things.
but if we're not supporting it today,
Right,
like, I don't currently, well, and I may be alone on this, but I don't think we wanna manage a splash pad. There's so many, it's the diaper issue, okay? I won't go into detail, but, you know,
I understand.
splash pads have a very short period, a seasonal period of being,
I mean, we were further south, where nine months a year, or for you, maybe it's a different argument. But like, the splash park will be turned off right now.
for sure.
In your survey, where's the splash park? Where's that?
that wasn't high.
It was not?
Depends on whether it was the paper or
all I can,
online.
all I can tell you is that it's not on Parks and Rec list.
Yeah, Parks and Rec hasn't granted.
It's a survey, where did it show?
It showed up,
It showed up,
Yeah.
but it wasn't super high.
and it showed up under, and there was a difference in placement between the online replies and the Facebook.
Well, because the younger people, with
Which
younger
makes
kids,
sense.
obviously like it better. But maybe something that we reassess, as you're saying, as we move forward. Fitness stations is another one that's out there.
Mhm.
I like fitness stations myself. I don't see it as a high priority. I think that's the problem with fitness stations. You know, they're great.
Is the fitness station something that somebody could, if it's important to people, that we could have on the dock, on the side of, basically, use the model like the veterans.
Yeah.
That if people want the fitness station, or like, the trail system, where, we throw in sweat equity from people that want it, that they basically say, okay, we'll help match money, or maybe provide the money, but that we basically take it off the staff's hands for the most part.
Was that on the most recent CIP recommendations we brought?
No, it didn't make it to their.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, there's some of these things that we might not be too
Well, it depends on,
aggressive on wanting to get done. If it's something that, a club or a group of people want to adopt, we say, okay, what we're like an Eagle Scout project in a way. That if somebody wanted to take this on as a project, we say, okay, we'll help underwrite it, but we're not gonna do work.
and
And
I,
that's a possibility. I still live in year 6.
yeah, and I had seen some that were so simple
Mhm.
that, yes, it could be an Eagle Scout project. Or with a few, but then I've seen some that outdoor fitness center kind of thing.
You don't want to set up.
So are we good to just leave it in year 6?
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that some of these things that we keep pushing out, if somebody's interested in adopting them,
You can't.
Nope.
Oh, you can't push it. Why you don't hear people?
It's gotta happen under public comments.
It has to be, why is that?
Yes, because it's on the agenda that we.
Well,
Well, we wrote the agenda. Man, if you don't wanna hear from people, that's fine.
if there's something we wanna ask them about,
well,
We can ask.
Technically, if somebody wants to make a motion to modify the agenda, they can make a motion to modify the agenda.
So moved. I'll make that motion.
what is the motion?
To modify the event, to allow some of the citizens here to talk.
Well, I think there's a specific
public.
topic somebody wants to talk about.
Yeah, they wanna talk about the Redmond House, that's what they're here.
okay, well, we're not even to the Redmond House, and they're not on council, so.
Up to you. If your issue is that you don't wanna hear from people, these people.
That's 2 weeks right here.
Why don't we wait till we get to the Redmond House, and then if you wanna direct a question to them, what are your feelings about
Yeah,
that?
that's a good idea.
How long is, when are we gonna get there?
We're in that section now.
We're in that session now.
We're in that
Oh,
section.
yeah, okay.
We're almost there.
Almost.
I'm sorry, we have a motion on the floor. You're
Yeah,
right.
what, can you tell me what your motion is? You wanna move discussion of Redmond House up to next?
Yes,
He wants to move public comments up.
public
Well,
comment.
you said our comments.
Well, we have to tell them what we're
Well,
thinking.
we're
That's the
almost
way he-
to Redmond House, so
Couldn't
I think
vote.
he's
That's
okay.
why I said we
Are
couldn't
you
vote.
there?
So we're not-
Fine, for-
Are you all okay on that?
That's fine. I just wanna make sure that he's gonna be here for the questions.
So-
It dies
there a
for lack of a
second?
second.
To what?
It dies
The
for
die
lack
for
of a
lack of.
Well, I was just making
Okay,
sure.
Sure, thank you.
So that dies, but we're getting to Redmond House. We can go there now.
Okay, here we go.
I think this is an important project. You know, I know some of us disagree on whether we think it's important, but it has been praised by the public survey, by HBC, by subcommittee, by Parks and Rec. And I had a discussion with the attorney yesterday, and I said, do you believe that preserving this is vital to preserving our historic district? And he said, yes, absolutely. He said, if we allow it to either go to seed or we decide to demolish it, we are risking our historic district.
But you know,
Because
I
it's
don't,
a
I don't buy
control-
that, I think that's
Well,
BS.
you're welcome to talk to him. It's the historic district is one of our greatest assets in maintaining the small town feel and fending off the kind of inappropriate development that we don't want, which is why Oak Ridge was incorporated in the first place.
Well, I think we ought to discuss spending 500,000 in for a 1,100 square foot building. It's good,
Yep, that's a good question. Now, we probably will have to spend some money for septic if we go ahead with the refurbishing.
Mhm.
We do have local builders who say that they can build it for us.
have they committed to take that number you
No, they can't yet. We have to put it out to bid. My suggestion is to spend the next year, getting a landscape plan that I would suggest putting down here with sidewalk connections as an additional item. Like, look at how that was a priority for Parks and Rec to connect what they call the sidewalks to nowhere. We've got to beautify that corner, whatever we do.
Oh.
So do a landscape plan that integrates that house with the park, connects the sidewalks in an appropriate way. Put a budget item in here, probably about 45,000 for all of that.
Would that be your landscape, your planning and sidewalk planning and
It would be
the
implementation.
assessment? Okay, it's,
Hang on one sec, let me get it. So that would be for implementing a landscaping plan, which would go under consulting as $3,000 to $5,000, probably 3,000.
would that include the assessment of the septic?
The assessment, we would also do, the assessment doesn't cost anything. We think we need a new septic system. And that is probably gonna be $10,000 to $15,000, I'm told. So I would add that onto the renovation costs.
What did you take the number?
So I would say that in this coming year one, we would spend about 3,000 in consulting to get a landscape plan done. And nail down the costs for that, what it would cost to implement.
What's gonna be the bottom line?
Then in year two, I would increase that to 455 from 440 to include the septic. Although we're hoping that'll be lower if we have a local builder do it, who gives us, because that was a very high estimate, you guys saw that.
And they told us that it was high.
They did, and even in this,
And we need lights down the sidewalk in the parking lot.
Yeah.
that would be included in the landscaping. And then I'd add 45,000 in as a separate item in year two for sidewalk connections and landscaping.
So we're looking
The biggest problem, one, if we're successful in renovating, and use it for parties and things like that. We have a children's party, and there's 20 kids involved, we have a stacking problem, 20 cars dropping kids off, because the parents are gonna drop the kids off. So now we have a traffic jam at that corner. We don't have 1,100 square feet inside because the fireplaces are gonna stay, which means you don't have a contiguous space in there. So you'd be lucky if you can support 15, 20 people in there, maybe 25.
They said 40, the architect said 40.
Yeah.
So
The
that's
biggest problem I have is $500,000 easily.
Yeah.
If we did it all ourselves. Now, if you wanna go with the heritage, with the veterans model,
where we commit to, supplying $200,000 and everything else is up to fundraising, I'd be possibly considered. But I just cannot understand, we're gutting the building, so any historical value internally is gone. Where most of the other historic houses in town have been preserved internally, not just exteriorly, internally.
That's
So-
not true.
No, that's not true.
The
That's not
rental
true.
houses-
Requirements,
What?
the requirements.
There are no
No,
requirements.
I'm not saying they're required, I'm saying
But it's
that
not
they
true.
have an interior relatively historic looking. They haven't gutted the internals of the building, we don't require it. But I'm just saying it, and the other thing is to a non-historic type person looking at that farmhouse, even when we first looked at it, people didn't think it was historic because they said, well, when was it built? No, it was built in the 30s, it was built in the 40s, it was built in the 1800s. There's not much historic significance visually to it. I mean, you know, if you're a trained expert, you can say, oh yeah, look at how the beams are on the front porch. But just looking at it, it looks like a regular house. So I struggle with it because we're gonna have a building that I don't believe is gonna be used that much because of its location. Because people are not gonna find that convenient to use because it's not near anything else in the park. So if somebody wanted to have a wedding there or anything like that, it'd be difficult because there's nothing else around. You know, you have a two-stall bathroom, okay? Like I said, we have the septic. I struggle with spending $500,000 to get a building that isn't gonna really preserve the historic character of it because inside interior is gonna be all modern.
Did
I
you
mean,
know that we're gonna take off the moderns, the architect has proposed taking off the modern siding?
Yeah.
And the historic siding is underneath. It is definitely a 1930s craftsman style. It does go back to pre-1900. It is the last remaining farmhouse on what was all farmland around here. So one of the things that you educate people about is that not all historic buildings are grand and gorgeous. They're vernacular, everyday homes. And
So
those
you're
are
gonna
what-
be just as aggressive with the brick stone storefront up on 150?
That's not a contributing structure. That was built in the 50s.
Okay.
This one is a contributing structure that was documented in the original survey for the historic district. And it is absolutely true that if we don't preserve what we own, the only historic building we own, we are putting the historic district at risk. And, you know, Michael said,
I think that's hyperbole. Yeah, I think that's a lot of hyperbole.
I'd invite you to talk to the attorney.
I will.
I'll tell you, please do.
We gotta make a decision, not the attorney.
I thought,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I thought Randy had some interesting points.
Well, yeah. I was
And I'd
gonna
like to hear from him,
I'll share and I'll run.
okay?
Thank you, George. Thank you, Council. You know, I don't come to these that often. Last time I came to a budget meeting was about 3 years ago, and I don't like budget meetings. They're terrible. I believe one thing, that you're gonna build something that's rarely gonna be used. I honestly believe that. Let me share a little bit. You've got space in here where, I'm not talking parties, but meetings, that people can use, these things don't get used. You can make adjustments. I've heard this story about, oh, the carpet's gonna get ruined. Change it. Put a different floor down. Do it there, but here's the idea, a vision for that, which I think would be used an amazing amount. And whether you do it, or whether you have a private entity do it, the concept is, I'll call it drinks are us. That in that building, you have a slushie machine, you have coffee, you have smoothies, you have all these drinks that someone can get. And imagine in the back, a beautiful patio done in that period, whatever you would do. Beautiful patio with umbrellas, tables. Imagine on every time someone walks around in the morning, this thing could be staffed by veterans, it could be staffed by high school students, it could be run by a private entity. You could sell it to someone as a concept and say, hey, imagine walking through there and seeing on a Friday night some music playing outside and a food truck there where people can get a little bit of food You're not building a restaurant, you're building a place. What do people want when they're here? Bottled water, a soda. Have ice cream machine where you have, by the way, real simple cones. A real simple concept that you can run this and you don't have to get into the health department. And people would bring their kids like crazy to have an ice cream cone. They bring like crazy to have a smoothie, to have my little 11-year-old granddaughter, I took her to Starbucks the other day and almost died when it was $9 for the drink she loves to have. It wouldn't cost that there. But I think you could take that space and create something. I'm not saying knock it down. I've been inside that building, it's totally stripped. I also know this sister building, which is built, I believe, virtually at the same time. They were brothers. It was just bought up by NFM. Who knows?
Financial folks.
The financial folks. That building, those were brothers. One brother lived here, one brother lived there. I looked at that other building very closely.
Excuse me, they were not brothers.
Okay, I was
The
told,
brothers live down here where.
I was told that they were brothers, so then someone gave me bad information. But I was told the same builder built those two, is what I was told. But you know what, that detail's not important. I think
exactly
having,
the same here.
I think having a little room there for meetings, I think is a waste of $500,000. I think if you're gonna create, I think, by the way, if you're going to turn it into something that will truly get used, I think you gotta think of a different use for it. And make it look beautiful, okay, it's a cool entrance to the park. But I'm not saying don't leave it up, don't knock it down. I'm saying I think the use you're looking at, it's sort of like build it and they will come. And I've learned a lot, by the way, about doing meetings in the Oak Ridge Room. 130 of them a year over the course of 3 years. I also know what the challenges are to bring the AI church online and get that done. I'm just saying this because I think it's a waste of money. I'm not saying don't leave it there. Come up with a different concept to use that. That's all I'm saying.
We did, just I want to remind council that we went through a long process assessing different uses. And that the information, hold on.
I just couldn't.
Oh, the info that we went through, a subcommittee went through a lot of different possible uses, working with staff. And this seemed to be the best use. Now, this can be used for farmers markets, little drinks festivals, whatever you want. But we have gotten incredible public input on how much it will be used. So
It was very high in the radar.
it was high in the ratings, but we've also, hold on,
With that, I can leave, by the way. It's like looking at a survey. I spent 27 years doing surveys. I know enough about the surveys that have been done for the town. If you just look at those, you're not truly hearing what the people are saying. I'm gonna leave with that, because there are inherent things in those surveys that have been done that would get you the
well, that
answers.
isn't, what I'm saying is that isn't the only thing we've done, but thank you.
There's a lot of people in this town that think it's a waste of money.
I do believe.
A lot of people.
I do believe.
And I hate to leave like that, but the reality is, I think we can find a better way to spend our money.
We're gonna return to
Right,
council
I gotta go.
discussion, I think.
I do believe,
I gotta go, bye-bye.
I do believe if you do a survey out with dollar value on it, you get a lot of different results.
Right, a lot of people wouldn't have voted for the fields. Yes,
Um,
Sean?
I've got to head out here shortly, so I was just gonna ask if any of the council members had any specific questions about this project for me on staff.
Do you have any, I don't, does anyone have a question for Sean?
Not specifically, especially since essentially we're leaving it in year 2 at this point.
My biggest issue with it.
Okay,
is
go ahead,
if we
Sean,
can-
thank
If we can preserve it for a much lower number, I'm okay supporting it. But $500,000 does not believe, I do not believe that $500,000 is responsible use of taxpayer dollars to get so little payback. If we can do it under the veterans model, where we say, okay, we'll budget $200,000 for it, you guys come up with the rest of the money, I could get on board for that. $500,000 is a really big number
And if there's that's $300,000, they could do a lot of other things. Sidewalk down the Fogelman.
Look at this fella, you have to keep, you have something.
No, I mean, if you want,
No, go ahead.
opinions,
Are
my
you a resident of
expertise.
Well, keep it very short, because
I
we're running
built
short on
and
time.
refurbished homes before that I've salvaged, and unfortunately, there's been some I couldn't salvage because they were so bad. I would just ask you to look at that structure. Usually you lose historical significance when you do aluminum siding, when you take apart and.
This has been
discard.
evaluated by a historic architect.
I've done, it, so I'm just offering my opinions. When you have a rock foundation, you have a lot of issues, especially if you're saying the house goes back to the 1930s, because it looks like the house really hadn't been preserved the way maybe it should have been. The costs that I see you have up on the screen come out to about $440 a square foot. That's a significant cost to rehab something that's been ripped apart. That lost probably 60% at least of its historical significance. The other thing, when you do take off the aluminum siding, it depends on what you're gonna find underneath.
We know
Some
what's underneath,
aspects.
we do. Anyway, thank
What's
you.
underneath?
The historic siding, oh, hold on
I'm
one
gonna go,
second.
but I appreciate the talking. I
Thank
definitely
you.
don't like getting cut off, but I appreciate that.
Sir,
If you need
I'm
help,
sorry,
give
for
me a
the
call.
record, what was your name again?
Danny Okada.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, we just need to start moving forward.
I think that, I'm inclined to suggest, a similar situation. That we should probably go with the basics, like you were saying, do this under the veterans model. Let's see just how much support there is out there. And besides, I think that if we go with, 200,000 or whatever that number was, and then we do a matching situation from that point forward, then we're gonna find out not only that there will be great support for this house and for the preservation of that house, but you get community buy-in into that house.
You know, I think that sounds like a good idea, and I just want to say, respond to that, because I heard you suggest that before. There is in many, veterans sites are typically done with public-private partnership with people, communities,
That's true.
donating money. A structure that the town owns to ask citizens to pay for that when you don't like the price tag, but we can afford the price tag. And we have a responsibility to care for the one historic home that we
It's not
own.
historic. I mean,
It is historic.
You can
It's
see you're taking up, well, from your plan, you've taken all the stuff interiors and
So
stuff.
all we wanna do is preserve its look and feel, take the aluminum siding off, clean up the exterior, and we're done. So if all you wanna do is preserve the structure, so we can say, hey, look, there's the structure.
That it would not preserve the structure. You know, Sean talked about this at our last meeting, that if you left the insides gutted, it would eventually just deteriorate.
Well, that's where we are right now.
Right.
Yeah, the
So
I've
what-
sunlights and everything.
visited many parts where you cannot go on buildings. They're basically just exterior buildings. You just look at the exterior, because since we don't wanna preserve the interior anyway, you could
No, we
definitely
want to
make,
use the interior.
You what?
what I'm
we
just
want to
saying,
use
you wanna
it.
use it, but
And the fireplaces are just beautiful.
I understand, I'm not arguing that the building is something that would be nice and pretty and all that kind of stuff, it's just that I struggle. The liberal pinko at the table here is arguing with all the conservatives about how they should be more prudent with spending money. And it just is funny, I think it's pretty funny that, the conservatives at the table say, hey, let's spend money, let's spend money.
No, you can't, sure.
And I'm the tax exempt liberal that is saying, hey, you need to slow down here, you're gonna spend $500,000 on something that we're not gonna get $500,000 worth of use out. I'm not talking about revenue, I'm not
Staff
talking
has
about
told
revenue.
us that there are tons of people who want to use an indoor structure in the park.
I'm not sure they wanna use that structure.
If I built a structure somewhere else in the park, I guarantee it can use all the time.
That structure, there's a ton of public interest in
I
it,
think,
Well, there's so much interest, why don't we get them to come up with the money
Yeah.
for it?
because we own it and it's our
we
responsibility.
own the back, land on the back.
We
No,
land
but
the
those
land.
are, that was developed, that idea came up as and almost every veterans project in every community is done through a fundraising
So
process.
I think that in this case,
That would be very unusual.
under the HPC guidelines, we're not responsible for the historic preservation of the interior of buildings,
That's fine.
as you know. I mean, I know you.
In fact, one of the things I like is this functional.
And the fact that, you're looking at the exterior. Now, we can preserve the exterior, but I do believe that as far as the usage, there needs to be some public buy-in into this. And I'm not, and I think that's where the model that, we were talking about here could possibly work. Because I think
Who would be responsible for doing that?
HPC.
I think that would be a very difficult, enormous project. It
Who
has
is
to-
responsible for, who
The special events,
Well, then
because
we
they
could
came up.
Then fine, then you put the special events,
No,
they're
that's
next.
not their job. Martha,
Why is
you
that
wanna-
not, hold it, why is that not their job?
Well, special events is not a, statutory committee.
Mhm.
They're doing projects that they want to take on. I think for us to assign something to them that huge, when they're not even
See
done.
if they'd be interested in
I think we should.
I mean, you can ask them, that's,
I think
your comments, Martha?
Yeah, I know how I feel about it. I think we should preserve the building.
I don't have a problem with
Hold on, let Martha finish.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
I'm a little bit, iffy about the funding, the money. I don't think it's something we throw out there at the last minute and say, ask people to donate or whatever, especially when in terms of timing, when we got big fundraising going on for the, I honestly think it will get used. One of the things that I will insist on, should we go down this path and we do this, is that it be priced
Mhm.
in such a way, at a very just nominal type fee, in no attempt to recover cost or be profitable. And it should be like renting an indoor shelter or something like that, so that community groups that can't afford to go to the Oak Ridge Room, or someone who wants to have a family dinner and can't afford, or reunion or whatever, and can't afford the prices for the Oak Ridge Room or AI Church. I think there is a need. I don't even know what they are. I'm just
When I argue the return, I'm not talking about any kind of revenue
Right.
at all. I'm talking about usage. To be honest, I wouldn't have a problem with that lots of organizations can use it for nothing.
I still,
I don't have a problem, I'm not looking at this should be a revenue raising thing, that it returns anywhere near the amount of money you spend. Because even if we spend just $200,000 on it, it would take forever to return money, ever, because the maintenance on that building is not gonna be at $10 an hour, or $15 an hour, we're never gonna get back the money we spend on maintaining that building.
And be honest,
So I have no problem with that, I'm just saying is $500,000.
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of
And we
money.
don't know if it's going to be
We
that.
don't know that it's gonna be that.
Oh, it
much.
could be more.
Could be more, it could be a good bit less.
Well,
Oh, wait a minute, there was a time when you said it could be more than $200,000.
No, I never said that because we didn't have an estimate.
You actually were saying
That
it's
was
gonna
a
be less than
placeholder.
200,000, you said actually $200,000 was gonna be high. I
Remember,
remember those conversations.
I don't remember that, but I trust you. But everything we've bid out, our park is double, everything is double.
I understand that, and that's
So
what I'm saying,
it's
is
not
like,
surprising.
and like I said, I wouldn't even entertain this until we have the full price, which includes all the lights, all the sidewalks, all the landscaping. Even if you make an argument, the landscaping may already be something we're gonna do anyway. And also, I think we need to have a plan to deal with the fact that if there's gonna be a party there, how are you gonna deal with the traffic? How are
We
you
have
gonna
a
deal with?
parking lot.
No,
And there'll
the,
be
the
7
parents,
slots.
parents are gonna be dropping their kids off, so 20 cars are gonna line up
I
and
think
drop their kids off.
The plan would be to instruct people that there are 7 parking spaces.
Have you dealt with parents with kids?
Yes.
Well, may I finish what I was saying?
And they're gonna follow directions.
Of course they are.
Parents with kids are worse than kids.
Okay, can I finish
Yes, you know.
kind of my position? And this is gonna sound harsh, and so I hope I say it correctly. To let it deteriorate is unacceptable to me. To tear it down is unacceptable to me. That leaves us with refurbishing and utilizing it the best way that we can. Nothing's gonna be perfect. So I'm in favor of the project. I'm glad it's in year 2. Because that does give us some time, once we have the whole picture, to make some of these final decisions related to funding. But the one thing that I would like to hear, because we've all addressed it in a certain way from our own perspectives, what we've heard from the community in terms of the demand or the desire for it to be done. So I'd like to put Parks and Rec, John, on the spot a little bit, because that was actually number 2 after the Wi-Fi on your CIP priority list. And so I'd like to hear from him how Parks and Rec made that a priority and where they were coming from.
It came mostly from the surveys and input from the members, input from members of the board, from friends and associates in the community. I think also, I thought that, this is my opinion,
Okay?
that a lot of weight in my mind was, if it was to be demolished, then it's the one anchor in the community that goes back a long ways. And so it is the interest of the park, it's the interest of the park. And yes, maybe it's done in phases, maybe it's done to preserve 1 year and then another year. The final uses are determined and it's fitted out for those final uses. I don't know about the phasing, but I think most of it felt like that it really needed to be kept to maintain the image of the community. Yes, it is a lot of money, maybe eventually it is $500,000. I don't know, personally, I don't care. I think it needs to be kept, I think most people felt that way. from what they heard.
Well, let me ask you a question, Mr. Manager. Let's bid the project out, and find out what, to get some. real
George, can you
numbers.
speak up? I can't
No, I'm
hear you.
sorry. I said, let's bid the project out, and let's see, and get some real numbers.
What's it gonna cost us to develop a site plan?
I really want to.
We have the plans.
You have, how much did you spend?
Can I ask one question for you? Sure, I want to focus in on the reviews. So I just want to be sure I hear it right.
Would you give your name
for the
record?
Yeah, no problem. Van Tanner, 6605 Ashton Park Drive.
Thanks.
And you're right, we need sidewalk down all that. But I just want to be sure I understand this. Because in the information we sent out, it was like 8 to 2 when it was found out how much it's going to cost. But we see that we have 2 different cultures here. We have the culture of people that have been here a long time and appreciate the historic value. And I understand that that's what you want and like.
Are
I
you
have
asking
nothing
us
wrong
a
with that.
question?
So
We
the
can't answer
question, here's the
questions.
question.
No,
So the question is,
but you're doing this right.
Let
You
me
can't.
ask the question.
okay,
This is
I want to
new.
give background to add content. So we talked about the responsibility. I just want to be sure that when we're talking about $500,000 and the responsibility for doing this as a historic, if that is not pocket, if we do a survey and the people do not want We can still go ahead and do it.
I'm sorry,
This
you know
is
what,
really-
really,
I just
that's
want
not an appropriate,
That's not,
if you had a,
Well, you said, I'm just going on.
I think what
yeah,
I
thank you though, thank you.
but what I would like,
We're not
what I would like,
this isn't an interview right now.
what I would like to do is direct our staff to go ahead and let's put this thing out for bid to get some real numbers.
We can't bid, we might get into other cost estimate.
Let's
All right.
get, let's
I don't
get.
know that we
Why
want
can't
to
you
do
do
it.
it?
Well, then get to do it, huh?
I don't know that we want to bid the project if we're not intending to actually.
Well, then let's, but what I'm saying is I want some, we need some real numbers.
Well, that's what I may get to.
Yeah,
So let me just clarify that what we've already paid for is a plan that includes construction documents. We've gotten the plan, we haven't gotten the construction documents yet. What I was proposing is that we spend the next year, because we really need to focus on Heritage Farm Park, and staff is gonna be tied up.
Right.
So we get that little landscaping plan done, let's put the finishing touches on how much it costs to beautify that corner to make it an appropriate welcome to the park.
Mhm.
Then we would have all the information we need, and at this meeting in the following year, we would have all of that information, and we could say, hey, are we ready to go on this in the following year? And then we would bid it out
Okay.
if we approved it.
yeah, because I would feel a little bit more comfortable if, since, you know, someone has already said in our conference, that they thought that was a high price, 400.
Yes.
I would like to get some, you know, start seeing some real numbers.
I'm not
Or
sure.
at least, or at least have them.
We never get real
Well, we
numbers
can't-
until we.
Well,
It isn't
but hold
fair.
on, you know,
Hang-
you're misusing.
It isn't
Uh,
fair for us to ask one person to give us a quote on something. We have to put it out to bid and let people respond.
Yeah, I'd like to get some real numbers, because I mean, if the 440,000 is an inflated number that has nothing to do with inflation, then I think that might change the, you know, make it more palatable for us. I mean, I like historic preservation, I've always been for, and I like the idea, it's kind of what Randy was talking about, old building, new life, new use. And, that's what I've always, you know. And,
Maybe a public-private partnership or something.
well, that's, you know, there are things that we can do, you're right.
And if we
Yeah.
push it to next year, then we have time to explore that,
Yeah.
if we want.
And I'm not against preserving the building, I'm not.
Yeah.
I just can't see the need to spend that amount of money to do it.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'd be okay if an insurance agency wanted to use the interior and keep it for, you know,
Well, we-
because that's new use, old building, new use.
But I'm fine, to finish the conversation, it can stay where it is.
Mhm.
We need to get more numbers, we need to get more information
Yeah.
about what, like I said, I've always said that I'm not gonna vote on it until I know the total cost for everything,
Mhm.
which includes lights down the sidewalk,
Yeah.
sidewalks, landscaping,
Right.
septic,
Mhm.
everything necessary
Yeah.
to do there. We need to know what all is. And we need to have a plan for how you're gonna deal with when events are held there.
Yeah.
Like, how are you gonna stack those people? How are people gonna deliver people and stuff like that? Because I don't wanna create a traffic nuisance either.
Well, you know, and I like, as a conservative, I do like the bottom line.
Yes, fine.
So-
Go ahead.
So bottom line, thank you for saying yours, is that I'm just gonna keep it right where it is.
Yeah, that's fine.
Keep it
Except,
that.
I think we're gonna put it 455, because we know we've got to do septic, if we might as well be realistic about it.
Right, it's going to be high, and then we need
Right.
to add a number for, down at the bottom for sidewalk connections and landscaping for that corner. Which I think in the Redwood
Yes.
House Subcommittee meeting,
And it'll probably be Wi-Fi.
I will. And then we were also, and I believe that you, Madam Mayor, I believe that you said it might cost us maybe $3,000
well, that's
to
a,
get our consulting fee.
but that would
You
go in
want
the consulting,
Right.
consulting budget.
not in the capital budget. So it doesn't go here.
Okay,
And did you had
45.
mentioned what you felt about.
45,000 was what we had talked about at that meeting with Sean's input.
and so basically today, we are not making any decision as to what path forward is.
And-
We want to be clear about that, so
Yes,
that it doesn't show up that we made that decision.
And one of the reasons, I just want to say again, I thought we should push it out so that we could get all those additional costs nailed down.
I think it's good.
And so that we could free staff up, yes. That was the, and in
Did you
fact,
want to push that either, you're saying?
No,
It's already out there.
That's in your.
Right.
yes. So in other words, the committee at first really wanted to push to do it in year one. And I said, I don't think that's realistic for those two reasons.
There's too many things going on right now.
Right. So field 5, do we want to leave it out in the final column there?
I think it's still another one of those things that we wouldn't have time to deal with in the next couple of years anyway. Because like I said, we got a new park going in.
I think we've got all we need for those, so I'm okay with leaving it.
Parking lot expansion, I feel like I don't know enough about what that really means to put it on the capital plan. The big parking lot.
What?
The big parking lot at the park.
On Lisa Drive, so are we talking, maybe Terry, would you be able to answer where we're going? Are you talking about expanding, I guess, this way?
Yeah, you would come in, this first entrance here, and make a left, kind of like what we call overflow parking.
Yeah.
You would come in, there would be, 104 by 54, roughly 70 spaces. It would be running perpendicular to the existing parking lot. It would be, those river birches would be an island between that parking lot and the fields.
So you're saying you would make a turn?
Yeah, so you came in the entrance, you'd be able to turn right, like you do
Yeah.
now, or turn left.
Well, when you turn left,
It was just straight.
Just
Yeah,
go
you go
straight.
straight over, and then you would make a right.
then you make a
Which,
right.
which would actually take it towards the Redmond House.
It would break it up a little ways, closer than what it is.
But it would mainly go deeper into the field. It would run parallel to the multi-purpose field. But it makes it.
Yes, perpendicular of the existing park.
So,
So in other words, it would kind of take that same path, flow that it does.
something like
Whenever
that,
we use that over the field, anyhow, really.
something like this.
Same,
Yeah.
So the house is over here,
Okay.
the house is over there.
traffic flow, that's what.
Oh,
So you-
I didn't realize it went in deeper.
See, I thought it was gonna run straight towards the house.
yeah, but no, he's saying it's gonna turn, because to be honest, I wouldn't want to run.
Okay, show me where you're coming into the parking lot.
So. Lisa Drive,
Yeah, there's.
you come in here, you turn left and turn right.
Turn left
Yeah.
and turn right? No, it would go straight. Turn left, go straight.
No, you would come in off of Lisa, you make a left, and make an immediate right.
That's what, yeah,
Okay.
you're following the traffic.
It's not the scale.
You're using the traffic flow.
I got you.
And it's
So like when it's,
When
the
they're in
Redmond
the Fourth
House,
of July or.
Redmond House is here.
Right.
This, I mean, this is really, it would be, these are the river birch.
Yeah.
But this is, you come in, and it would actually sit in here.
Yeah, like I said, not the scale.
Okay.
Like I said, this is Lisa. Yeah,
There you go.
okay, I understand.
And what is the demonstrated need and what's the source of the request? I guess is a good question.
Well, we came with, we've got issues anytime we've got a full
Sure.
park. Safety concerns, traffic concerns. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's kind of where that just came from. We've got people parking along Lisa, parking along
Yeah.
Leadville. We've actually got to go ahead and put stakes in the ground. We know that, since it is, we're moving curb stops and letting them drive into the grass. We call overflow parking, and it's the same type of thing that we do for, now, we still have to do that for Ridge Fest. Just because of the sheer numbers, but like I said, we feel that by increasing that parking lot, we'll save the additional
What,
space.
do you have some feel for when we should do this? Right now, we don't have a schedule at all.
No, I mean, it's necessary, I mean, the park's getting more and more use going on, so I think the
they would only increase as time goes on.
Is there any economies of scale to tack it on to the Heritage Park project?
It's
They have
too
the
late
same
to do that,
contractor,
isn't
they
it?
have the same contractor.
Well, I guess you could,
Yeah, it's probably late for that, not that you can't come up with a second contract, and maybe have, if that contract can balance those two contracts.
So I'm saying they're pouring asphalt over here and.
It depends on the bid, I mean, or a certain bid.
Let's not get too, don't get in the weeds on that.
one thing I wonder is when we get the new park online, is it going to, in some way, like are people gonna sort of spread out over the two parks? I would rather wait until we know a little bit more about how that usage is going to decide to put more asphalt over here. But
Well, once you get those two multi-purpose fields up and running, then you can bet you the bottom dollar that ORYA will be coming in and running some very big soccer and lacrosse tournaments, which just exasperates me for that additional pay part.
even though we'll have parking over there,
Yeah, well, because you have in essence, they use this, what we call the small practice field, they have 3 fields here and 2 fields there. But just like us wanting to build field 5, that those extra fields just generates additional teams that come in, because now they can run bigger tournaments because they've got, a greater number of fields.
There's gonna be a few years before these fields come online for something like tournament use.
It would be, I mean, and you were talking earlier about, when they're gonna do, if those guys don't get that seed, the sprigs in by June, you might as well wait till the fall of spring. Because you can't try to grow sprigs during cold weather.
So in
So in
terms,
answer to your question, I mean, that's really, if we got everything spring and established in spring, maybe that following fall, we would open it up for competitive play.
Well, this is a project that stands all by itself, has almost no dependencies on anything else, because there's no utilities we have to move, for the most part, right?
What are we talking about for the
The,
parking
I'm
lot?
sorry, the new parking lot. So if we decide to go along with the park, it's one of these projects that we could insert almost at any time. Because I'm not saying it would require some staff time, but it's not like, it would be a relatively short duration project. Relatively short, because you grade,
Absolutely.
but the contract process is the same whether it's a little parking lot or a big parking
no,
lot.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that if we decide to do it,
Certain threshold.
what I'm just saying is, when we decide to do it, it wouldn't have to be a long drawn out process to
Right.
say, hey, look, we've determined whenever we figure out that we need it, hey, we've got to pull the trigger on this. 6 to 9 months later, we have a park.
Okay, well, if we're looking at one of the driving needs for it is whenever we bring the other park online, and we may find that it does spread out the capacity, other than for certain things, it's all still going to be centered in Oak Ridge Town Park. But if we do it in terms of a response to the bigger tournaments, bigger weekends and that kind of thing, would you want to bring it online, say in year 3, once your fields over here are ready to go?
It's kind of funny once everything's. I agree that maybe plan it for 3, plan it, and then shift it either way, depending on what we find out. Like I said, it's a project I think needs to move, because like I said, we're
and
not,
I'm not wild about having more asphalt in the park.
Well,
No,
I'm
I
not
understand
either.
that, but if we need spaces for
Yeah.
cars, I'd rather have them park on asphalt than on the roads. Maybe we can look at some of the more, environmentally friendly type of parking lot materials and things like that.
I don't think that makes any difference.
Well, no, what I'm just saying is
It's
that.
not grass.
So,
No, well, no, there is. You use build a parking lot, that's grass.
excuse me.
Well, so you want to put it in year 3?
Yeah, I mean, now we have.
I'll go along with that.
Just for planning.
3.
Just to identify it and keep it around, like you said, we can keep pushing it out or flip forward.
We have a lot yet to do.
Yes, we do.
So let's try to move things forward. Small picnic shelters, that's for the current town park.
Remind me where they were being proposed? That is not on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board's short list.
That's a carryover from years ago.
So,
Let's see, on last year's CIP, so small picnic shelters.
Where would they be going?
yeah,
They were in year 23, 24.
Sarah, small picnic shelters, you remember where
I
they were going?
remember Bill Edwards talking about 1 year ago.
I tell you what, let's consider this being
That's-
used
yeah,
a lot correctly.
Yeah, that's
What's
where,
that, Sam?
I can see them being used a lot.
But where would they go?
where would they go?
Oh, that would be up to.
Well, that needs some planning.
Yes, and I think it needs kind of
Was it planned for the back of the town hall for you guys to use?
Okay.
Kind of interesting.
Let's take it off for now, and if it comes up as an issue with a better plan, what about the shade for existing playgrounds?
I've been called to task on my position on that a little bit.
Tell me what your position.
My position has been, I'm not crazy about the shade structures or convinced of the need. But I've been told that I'm wrong about the need. I'm more than one person. Terry, you want Terry and
Terry, you want to chime in on shade structures?
John?
Can we jump back on this? We think these picnic shelters should have been on Heritage Farm Park. I think the same
Those are the ones that are scattered
Like
around
along
there.
the trail, it just got put under the wrong.
Oh,
Okay. That's why we know, nobody knew where they were.
Okay, so we're eliminating
but
that?
they
Oh,
weren't,
put it back.
they're not part of the,
They're not part of part of,
They're not
but
part
they
of
were sort of
they
placed,
are.
like along with the tennis courts and basketball.
let's move them over there then, and if you wanna leave them in like year 4 or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, they're in year or 3, ain't it?
Yes, they are
Let's
on
move
that.
them out to year 4. I
And you're
mean,
gonna
if
move
you
them to
guys think
Heritage
that's
Park.
good.
Yeah.
Pretty good for.
4, yeah.
Okay. You know, we're back, we've taken care of that, and we're back to the shade structures. I'd like to hear Terry and, John address that, because I've been hearing, you know, something different.
What is it?
What is it? Shade
What are they?
Well, this came from, one of the members comes to the park, like, every day.
Yeah.
John, good answer, comes over here. Sure. One of the members comes here on those daily walks.
Mhm.
Yes, family, they come here and play, sports. And he, has had comments from other people that come here that it's difficult, especially in the summertime, to sit near a event area, a field, or even in a play area, and not have any shade at all. If you remember, I kind of related that to the survey that talked about shade. Remember, that was one of the top inputs for shade, be it trees or whatever. So that's, I think, where that came from initially. So the shade structure could be trees, I guess, but take a lifetime.
Well, I thought it was
I thought
the
it was
shade.
specifically
Yes,
for playgrounds.
Are these sails or are these mechanical?
well, I'm just kind of giving the background on
No.
shade in general. But we all know that trees are gonna take 75 years to create shade. So we felt like the shade structure could be an awning, it could be a geometric thing that, whatever, some sort of, matter of fact, I think McGill gave us some ideas of shade structures, didn't they, Bill?
It is.
And so that's where this came from.
Yeah, they're still opposed, the new technology, is really Teflon. That's why I was never really big on those before, because they have a really short shelf life. But these new polymers, like Teflons, have a good, strong, length of service. They're very wind resistant, handle snow loads. They're
But Terry,
placed-
they're basically on poles,
Right, they're on
with
steel
like a
poles.
triangular.
There's different ways to do it. You can pick out certain elements and either cover them, or you look at your periods, high periods of use, which is probably gonna be, afternoons in the winter time, and summer times can be obviously a little more. But if you're doing a sale, then you would actually try to accommodate the peak use of that. Now, when I say sale, could that be a cantilever, is that, what's that called?
I put them up there on posts and we stretch between posts.
Yeah, I mean, you could see, exactly, I mean, you could see, squares, I mean, you could have accommodate in squares. And with us living in Southwick, this, I mean, and UV and the cancer rates, I mean,
Do we think these numbers are accurate?
Yeah, this was,
30,000 and 20,000.
Oh,
it was $50,000 for 2 structures?
yeah.
Yes, it was for both the way I remember it is these were shade structures for the existing playgrounds at Oak Ridge Town Park, which would be, and I think it was 30,000, we would kind of divided that 50, or 30,000 for the larger one and 20 for the, are they realistic? Is that
Those figures are just
a place?
a couple years old.
Yeah, that was, Miguel gave us that quote.
Right. How do they look?
I
don't
I bought
You have?
them, yeah, and that's $200, 200 was the price we used to put it together. That was things pulled, that includes the pole and everything, it's just the fabrics. I'm
But
sure
we're
it's
talking,
gonna,
we're talking
This
about
is
putting
huge.
the whole playground under one.
how
No, it
big
wouldn't
that
be
area.
the whole
Well, I-
playground.
No, you would have to, what you'd wanna do is, I mean, you may have one covering the superstructure portion of the playground, you may have a smaller one. I mean, like I said, it could be done a myriad of ways.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the things about our 2 existing parking lots, we're working at a disadvantage because lots of times these things are put in back in initial installation. So you've got footers and stuff that you're working around, and so in both cases, we've got some drainage running through there. So that's probably pumped that cost a little bit, like if we went out to build a new playground here at Heritage Farm Park, and we were to incorporate the shade structure right there, then we may see an economy in the use of a particular post instead of a 20-foot post, it may be a 30-foot post. 22 for the apparatus and the extra 10 for the sail or the cover.
Okay, we're coming up, we're really in a time crunch here. So, George, we can't all hear you. And George, we're sort of in a time crunch here, we're running out of it, we've got a lot yet to do. I would probably be called out from people, because I just think it's North Carolina, and in the summer it's sunny, and you put sunscreen on your kids, even if you don't wanna take them out in the middle of the afternoon, you take them out in the morning or the evening. But I know that's probably not popular.
Yeah, that's been my position historically, and that's.
What if we move them out to years 2 and 3, and I think it sounds like we need better prices and some actual design on this. Like how would we fit it in? And maybe we end up saying, we can plan them in for Heritage Farm Park, but it's difficult and expensive to add it at this point for this park.
I mean, I think that, flexibility. So you're saying move it to 30,000 a year,
2, and the 20,000 to year 3. What do you think about that?
If we do that, then we need to direct staff to make sure that they're accommodated for over at Heritage Park, so that when the footings go in, there's already a place for the footing to go without any drainage issues, things like that. So the question always then is it better just to, do we do it at the same time Heritage Park is being built?
Well, that's a good point, Jim. That playground's been budgeted for this project. And it's budgeted without shade structures. So if you want to cover this one here, you probably need to throw one of those numbers into this coming year. So we got that 3.6 plus 30,000,
Plus 30,000?
whatever number, what the allocation.
We could do that as a budget amendment and find out how much it's gonna cost.
Yeah.
And we just had 40-foot one for our day program, built exactly the same people did the Epcot. And yeah, it really does help to put those screws in when they do the concrete, if not, they dig that out and put those in. It cost us $35,000 for a 24 by 24.
That's helpful, thank you. What do you think, Bill? What's your?
I mean, I think it doesn't hurt to at least make sure we don't, when they design the playground, to just build that into the
Yeah.
design, so that we can choose to install it.
George, you should got some examples.
Oh, okay.
I like that.
So are we
Okay.
talking about moving it into the Heritage?
Well,
Park
but they're
project?
two different issues. This is shade for the existing playgrounds at the town park. You're talking about adding on a shade structure to the Heritage Park.
But couldn't we figure that out when we're purchasing the playground equipment?
Yes.
Okay. So let's wait and see and find out how much additional that will cost, and we can deal with that as a budget amendment.
Can I make a suggestion, and I don't wanna tie up time, but if we're talking about what we're gonna consider when we're talking about the new playground equipment, the design of the actual playground and your picking features, I'd like to see us consider, your item number 5, the ADA accessible, that some of the features of the new playground be ADA. Maybe not whole playground, but at least some ADA accommodations in the design of the, Heritage Farm Park.
Good idea.
Is that reasonable?
I'm in favor of that.
That was our item number 5.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is on that Whitaker property. but,
Yes.
same
And just do it as a part of that.
Yeah.
Because you're picking pieces of equipment within the budget.
Okay, is there anything we haven't addressed under the current town park? I think we did it all. Now what we really need to do is come to some decision points about funding and see where our bottom line is. We can use, I think the simplest thing for staff is to use all of the ARP money on the new park. Is there anyone who wants to do something different?
I think so.
No, we don't wanna have all those requirements split over 2 or 3
Okay,
projects.
One project.
One
Yes.
project.
That's my
Yeah.
project.
To give you an idea, if you split it out, at a minimum, you're looking at about $8,000 plus inflation per year for the single audit during each fiscal year, because as long as the project's ongoing, we must have a single audit per year.
So we just won't see one single audit.
so
We
you
talked
can
in
go
great
on there.
detail about, we can package it, it's one single audit, but with 2 income streams. So there is a little additional cost, instead of 8, it's 10,000, but it will cover both income streams, which is the Forest Grant, which under North Carolina law must have it. This will package it, it's 10 grand, the single audit will have 2 opinions, plus 2 more opinions, there's a total 4-opinion package. But it will cover all compliance, fed and state, all packaged together.
Okay, so let's annotate the ARP, say, all, Heritage Park or HFP or something.
Right.
The next thing is, let's look at the bottom line, and, by my calculations, I'm just throwing this out there, and my spreadsheet isn't exactly what we've decided, but it's pretty close. I think it might behoove us to borrow about 1.2 to 1.3 million dollars.
Well, I think from our conversation earlier this week, we would be having to unrestrict if we do not borrow. Is that correct?
You would need to unrestrict the fund balance for water.
To spend on
And
parks and
possibly
things
the
like
future
that?
land purchase. Because you're looking at, by year 2, you're looking at, well, wow, look at that, in year 1, you're negative.
I would rather borrow with the favorable rates
That's because of the 1 million for water.
that's in there,
That's right.
and we haven't added, than to unrestrict funds for things that are still long-term.
The 1.15 million for water, you got it up there on the expense side, but, it it would have to come in as a revenue
Okay.
line.
Oh, see, that's why, because I didn't put it in until the second
Oh,
year.
I'm sorry, that's right, I meant to remind you about that.
But it's still a cash flow.
But it wouldn't come in as one, well, yeah, I guess it could come in year one or year two.
Even with the fact that it's coming.
The reimbursement plan, if, as soon as we spend it, we would turn around. And
Okay,
normally, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but normally, on the part of it's, if they're built like that, it's as you go. You don't spend all 490,000, pause, gather your bills, turn them in.
but the other problem is, we could just encumber it and not spend it, which means we wouldn't get reimbursed until we
Until we
actually
spend.
You gotta
spend it.
spend it.
So anyway,
So
it's,
just in I mean, that's really kind of academic, but I think if you showed it in the same year
okay.
that you're spending it, you get, now you're back to 600.
I'm a little more, right now with the cost of money being so low,
Yes,
I would say we want to keep our fund balance because realistically, interest rates are going to go up a little bit, which means we might make a little bit more than our money market fund balance. But I think it maintains our fund balance really strong because like I said, there's a lot of other things. A lot of other unknowns.
I would rather borrow it up front
Yes.
than run into a situation in which all of a sudden we're having to scurry
And now.
Yeah.
to borrow it or complete our fund balance.
That's fine. That's fine.
So-
I'm good.
Sam,
Yes, ma'am.
if we borrowed, say, $1.3 million,
Yes, ma'am.
what do you think the debt service would be, like 150,000 a year? Because when I looked at the finance committee's estimates,
Is our rate gonna be different?
The rate is slightly up, it'll be, the rate we've got reserved now, the 219 we lost is at 2.39 right now. We're still sub 3%.
so for finance, they had said 2.75 million, the payments would be 251,000.
You drop that down by roughly half, you're gonna be looking at roughly half of that.
Yeah, okay.
So you could put in debt service, to be generous, you could put it in at 150 or 125 or 150.
I can run a specific number for that. The other thing to remember is that with the original plan, we were gonna be pulling roughly 855,000 out of fund balance to go along with the loan proceeds.
And this won't be.
That was how we were gonna get up to the 3.6. So if we do the borrowing, we're at 1.3, we got 1.7 in ARPA, that's 3 million, we got 490, and we got the 50. However you split that up, we're knocking on the door of the 3.6. If the project comes in there, we're going. Y'all had asked that we get approval. We were approved to go up to the 3.25 on the loan.
Right.
So, and Bill and I had a very good phone meeting with the banker. For some reason, Zoom is not liked by the banks. I don't know whether it's need to be a security breach or what. It was just kind of odd. But we had a phone conference on the phone in my office on the speaker. They were very agreeable. And basically, we'll still get the rate that is available at that time, market rate.
For the smaller amount.
For a smaller amount. All the terms, they were agreeable. We would still be able to pay down in accordance with the previous terms, all that. So that would make it better, but you would essentially be putting 855,000 back in. So if it is the 3.6, you borrow 1.3, you got 1.7, you got the part of funds. You pretty much have got the part built and paid for with 855 that was gonna come out of fund balance staying there. So
And available to us for something else.
yes, and available to you for other things. And then you have a few more years and we will have the land paid off. And I would probably lean towards keeping with our plan that when we do have the Whitaker note paid off, use that available funds and go ahead and kill this one.
That's actually
Right.
in this year, the year 6.
I always wonder why with money being so cheap, we would pay off our debt.
Well, that's, you're still paying some interest, but you're buying, the thing about it, you have flexibility with fund balance. Cash is king. I've dealt with this, Martha may or may not as a CPA, but there's a time aspect. If you've got cash and something becomes available, you can buy it. It gives you opportunity cost that you can't calculate. If an opportunity presents itself, you can get it.
But with that argument, I would want to keep my money.
Yeah.
And not pay my loan off.
You gotta have the balance there. It depends on what the rate structure is. Now, if the rate structure is, in this case, I see where you're coming from. If the rate structure, if rates are up in 5 or 6 years, then definitely you would string that loan out as far as possible. If our earnings are higher than the rate we're paying out, then the smart thing is to pay it off, put the money into savings. But you basically, you buy savings by paying off a loan early, but it all depends on the rate, whether it's an inversion or not.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, I don't, you know,
Well,
like I
let's-
said, I understand, I would prefer
Yeah,
not to
let's
have
add the
that.
loan in.
So if I run
Okay,
this
we're fine.
scenario to look at the bottom line right now,
I think in 6 years, I hope we still have 1% interest, 2% interest rates in 6 years, but I don't.
so we have to unrestrict by year 3. And
Well,
we're,
wait, Bill, if you put the loan in there?
no, I just wanted everybody to have a baseline
Okay.
to know what we're looking at without the loan. And then if we take 1.3 million out of this budget year, so that becomes 2,080.
Well, wouldn't it be better to show it as income? I wouldn't do that because that is the actual cost. I would go down to where you're doing additional funds and add the loan in as
Just,
an income line.
just so that people are looking at it and don't know our thought process today.
And as bad as I hate it under GASB, when we do borrow money, we do have to show it as a income stream. It's the
And
only,
then you would add another debt service next to the Whitaker property, a debt service for this money, the bank loan.
That's actually already here, but just not populated.
Okay, so we're talking
Okay.
150, you said?
Yeah, probably.
How many years?
Well, certainly, we would fill out this, or this,
Just as a ballpark.
Okay.
So we still need to, need to unstrict some maybe.
So your fund balance is still gonna be, 1.5 million even at those. But
Right, and honestly, by the time we get to, what's 24, 25, the headaches aren't working for me, year 3, we will probably know what we are going to need to spend for water and that kind of thing, so we might be able to comfortably unrestrict the water fund balance if we've done what we wanted to with the state money.
Yeah.
By that time, we should hopefully will know.
and we haven't talked about the land purchase amount, we can use that there for now.
in there forever.
Right. Okay, are we happy with the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Council,
I am.
okay, and Sam and Bill, you're okay with it. So let's move on to the policy discussion, item number 5.
So are we, I guess when you sort
I
of
guess-
make a motion to approve the CIP, you're also making a motion that we go back to Truist with a 1.3,
I believe our motion was up to,
well, that's true.
was our original motion?
Yes,
The law was up to,
Yes,
so I don't think you need another one.
Okay, fair enough.
You can check the minutes.
Do we need some kind of motion on what we just did?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the CIP as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries and the CIP is approved.
Do we
For
have,
our work, thank you.
do we have to do it again after, at council?
No,
No.
okay, no, this is a meeting, this is it. Okay, now, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
The only thing about special meetings is you only can act on what's on the agenda.
Yeah.
We can't.
They go outside of it.
We can't go outside the agenda.
So now we can look at the policy.
I think it would be helpful to have a motion on how you're allocating
in other words, agenda item number 4, I think it would be good to have a motion on that, so in case we need to
Okay.
show that in
Okay.
minutes or
Um,
paperwork.
now, I make a motion that we, allocate 100% of the American Rescue Plan funds to the construction of Heritage Farm Park, and 100% of the small town development grant funding, $50,000, as a matching fund to the Veterans Honor Grant
Second,
For next year.
for next year.
second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, and,
Yes, and then-
I'm sorry, any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries, and.
Doug speaks one in every once in a while.
I know. Okay, now we go on to the policy.
All 3 of these policies are needed to ensure compliance with the American Rescue Plan. We've got to make sure that we meet federal standards for conflicts of interest, for how we bid the projects out. The micro purchasing policy allows us to, instead of having to bid a project out that's $10,000, this is specifically for the audit contract. We have to bid out to, it's all of the federal requirements for bidding, unless you take this option of exempting yourself for single contracts up to $50,000, then you can go with the firm of your choice rather than bidding it out. It's a cheaper and much easier process for the town. You work with a trusted, known quantity rather than bidding it out and going with the lower bidder. School of Government is recommending everybody do it because it's an option. It just gives the town more flexibility.
I still gotta take out that $50,000 considered micro purchasing.
Yeah, it's the federal government.
Hey, very good.
I'd like to propose, based on Martha's, discussion with the attorney today, that on 3D, on the conflict of interest policy, that, we consider correcting the language in, line 3 on the last page to say, a member of the Oak Ridge Town Council. For purposes of this paragraph, a member of the Oak Ridge Town Council has a conflict of interest when he or she stands for, and then delete the words election as an officer or for, because we cannot apply this to people running for office.
And Michael's even suggested, and I talked to him after Martha did, we can probably strike that whole sentence.
Oh, okay.
Because the purpose of this conflict of interest policy is to make sure that staff is also included in conflict of interest.
Okay.
You've already got a conflict of interest policy, so this is kind of an
So
addendum.
you want to strike the entire D?
No, just
No,
that
just that
sentence
sentence.
for purposes of this paragraph.
Oh gosh, I knew it was a bad sentence.
It was, I didn't understand it either.
Conflict of interest, paragraph 2, 3D.
Read it,
3D,
3D.
the last sentence.
3D, okay. Okay.
Conflict of interest policy.
So with that change, is there a motion on these policies?
We make a motion to approve all 3 of these, Bill?
Sure.
I make a motion to approve all.
Wrong thing.
The micro purchasing policy, the conflict of interest policy.
I want to
and policy.
Okay, he's a second. Okay, any, motion been made and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And these
The motion
mainly,
carries and the
these-
policies are.
these mainly apply to federal dollars.
Yep, we probably won't use them other than for this ARP grant.
Right.
Okay, our next item is
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, who made second?
Doug.
Doug.
Doug, okay, thank you. Moving on to public comments, we got one member left standing of the public, do you want to say anything? Okay, hearing none, council comments.
The one thing I asked to put on here about the strategic plan priorities is, and I want to say right up front, we may be doing everything we can possibly be doing. My concern is that with the activity down at 68 and 73, effectively, another 1,000 people are being added to Oak Ridge. And if you also look at Alcorn's
Not
got,
to Oak Ridge.
no,
No.
effectively.
Effectively, not residential.
Okay,
They're living at the border of us. They're right at the border, which means they can easily come up this way and take advantage of the park. they're gonna be in our school systems, whether or not it's Northwest or not, I don't know exactly the boundaries. But what I'm saying is, we also have people in Alcorn, and there's gonna be more houses in Alcorn, and we have no control over them. So, in effect, we may be actually gaining effectively 1,500 to 2,000 people in less than 2 years. So my concern is whether or not we are really thinking about things that we don't know about. Are there things we're not thinking about that we need to think about? If a developer came to us today and said, look, I'm gonna develop this piece of land and it's gonna add 2,000 people to your town, I can almost guarantee you, we'd stop and have a meeting about it. We'd stop and think about it and say, okay, what's these 2,000 people gonna do to us? Because that's like, we're what, 7,000 people, 8,000? So it's 8,000, let's say. So if we were gonna grow our population by 25% in the span of 2 years, we would stop and think. And like I said, I don't know what we need to think about. So what I'm worried about is we're not thinking about things that we should be thinking about. And like I said, should we be proactively doing something like acquiring land so that we can control it? Should we be a little more aggressive in our village field plan? Should we take another look at our land use plan? Should we, I don't know, that's the thing, that's what I'm struggling with is, with that explosive of growth down here, we have Boom coming in. Boom's gonna bring in a couple thousand jobs. A lot of those people are gonna move here because they're middle and upper management. The engineers and things like that, they can afford to live up here. So I'm just worried that the pressure is increasing at a much more rapid rate than we anticipated when we developed our land use plan, when we looked at our village field plan. And I'm just worried that, are we really thinking about all the things that we might want to do? And I'm not saying we can have a meeting today and figure that out, but I think we need to have a strategic planning meeting sooner than later. Because if we wait too long, it's just gonna be on us, and we won't be
You
able
think
to
the
act.
fall is too late?
I'm worried. Like I said, I'm worried that, like I said, those apartments are almost ready to go. Sheets is down there. Like the other thing is like, oh, one of my concerns is the development down there may actually suck away retail, our commercial development. So that people won't be going to Lowe's, people won't be going to the bistro, people won't. And can we do anything about that? Not really. I don't know. What I'm just saying is, maybe there is.
So what do you
something to it.
suggest we do?
What I'm saying is, I don't know, that's what I'm suggesting, is that this is one of those things where I think we need to sit down and kind of brainstorm about what we could do. Should do, or could do, or, and I don't know what it is, that's what I'm saying is, I think we want to make sure that we're not being complacent. Like I said, in the end, we may be doing everything we can do, I don't know. But I think with that much activity going on, we should have take a moment to just kind of reset and say, hey, are we doing what we need to do? I prefer it to be sooner than the fall, but if the fall is when it is, fine. But I think, like I said, this happened so quickly that we may not have an opportunity to address some of this stuff.
When is Boom supposed to go?
Boom isn't gonna break ground, I think, until next year.
Yeah, so we're still talking a year or two.
Yeah, no, but those apartments down there, they're gonna be online this year.
Well, they may be online, but that doesn't mean they're full either.
Well, I'm just saying, they're gonna fill pretty quickly.
They'll fill as.
Our village field project discussion, if we decide to have a discussion about that, is a great time to discuss some of this, because I think that follows the pattern of what we've been doing since, Oak Ridge was incorporated in response to development pressure. And so I feel like we're on a good path of having addressed that in so many ways. I'm happy to move the strategic planning discussion up, but I have a feeling it's gonna be pretty hard to get it before August, given everybody's travel plans.
That's fine.
But I think we start by discussing whether we want to strengthen the village field plan at all, and that's an appropriate place to discuss that. And then we try to schedule a strategic planning meeting. And in the meantime, I think we really need to think about specifics about, I think our capacity for buying land is low, for instance, but I know you're just throwing that out.
Don't fixate on anything I said, what I'm just trying to throw is out there to kind of stretch our thing.
You wanna have a discussion.
Discussion, yeah.
I just think while we're preparing for that discussion, we should all try to think of specifics.
Yeah, And that's why I'm raising
So-
the issue, is I want to, collectively, we can think better than each individual. So, like I said, I don't know what the answer is to this thing, but I just think it's urgent enough that we should have a heavy duty discussion about things, so.
And one of the things I'd like to ask that, well, as we're preparing for this discussion, it isn't just as we're walking around and we're thinking about, well, what's gonna happen to Oak Ridge? Perhaps we need to know how many units are being proposed. There's a whole lot of apartments you don't see when you ride up down 68 on Pleasant Ridge.
Well, that whole thing
West.
down there is some.
And how many of those, what the
I know
projected
someone who has-
demographics are, in other words, we need something other than, oh my gosh, we've got people growing all around
Okay,
us.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we have a strategic meeting in August on this matter. Based on
Okay, and I just want to clarify that if we do strategic planning, I think we need to look not just at this issue.
Oh, yeah,
but-
I agree, great, but yeah, let's go, I make a motion that we have a strategic planning session in August. Are you okay? Is that,
I don't know that we need a motion, we just start planning for it and try to get it there.
But we have a consensus that
We
we'll
have
do
a
that.
consensus to do that.
But we have a consensus right now.
Yeah.
And I think we should.
Let's just go.
Yes, sir. So I withdraw the motion. Madam Mayor, I
Okay.
withdraw the motion.
And your opinion, Madam Mayor, to your point, and also, Councilwoman Marquez, and try to look at it. It's so hard.
Behind the
We
table.
talk to each other at first names every other time. Like I said, the reason I wanted to bring this up was to get people thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I'm struggling with what are some of the issues. I'm just worried that all this activity, so if we start thinking
Right.
about it, and then like I said, when we have our meetings, we might have some ideas about, well, here are the issues.
But we need the information pulled together, because I had a realtor tell me the other day, we were talking about something entirely unrelated. And she basically said, well, at our meeting, the housing people came and spoke to our association, and they're projecting with this, and this, there's gonna be this many percent that'll have school-age children, and there's gonna be this many people, and so the information that would be useful to us is there. I just don't know how to find it.
I think we can, I have a contact who can help us, I bet staff can do some work.
And with Boone,
Okay, are there any further council comments? I know Doug wants to say. Okay, let's then invite a motion to adjourn.
That motion is your.
Second. Let's go.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? You can stay here.
Thank you.
oh,
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't get my council